o'clock, and I want to call,
Studio, we're ready to go live.
I'm sorry, I'm ready. Are you guys ready?
Move to approve all items and go out of session.
So,
Move to adjourn.
thanks everyone who's watching. We are beginning this portion of our agenda where we talk about items that are coming before the council so that there's time to explain how they work and what, and to have a discussion around them. But before we begin this meeting, I'd like to start with our Deputy City Clerk and do introductions.
Billy Tons, Deputy City Clerk.
Marjorie Molina, City Council, District 5.
Lawana Mayfield, City Council at Large.
Mayor Pro Tem Braxton Winston.
Vi Lyles, Mayor.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Tarek Bakari, 6.
All right. We have, I think, 6 council members here. We usually would consider our consent agenda items and have Ms. Marie come on up to the table, to the podium. Are there any questions or comments that we need to follow up on? Or with whom, with what we need to follow, whatever. Okay.
No, Madam Mayor, unless anyone has any at this time.
All right. So with,
Mayor?
yes, Ms. Mayfield. Oh, Ms. Molina. Yes, on a consent item. Would you like to take, would you like, we have a couple of options for you.
Okay.
You can comment on things in it, or you could ask for a separate vote, or I think the 2 things we have a choice.
I actually just want to comment on one that I saw that I'm excited about, and so are the people of District 5. Consent item number 14,
All right.
which is Eastway Shamrock Intersection Project. It's an action to approve a contract in the amount of $1,335,300. And it is to authorize the city, well, I don't need to read the whole thing, but basically my comment is that we're pleased to see that it's a project that's going to improve safety, and we're really happy about it, so, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Molina. Any other, Mr. Graham?
Yeah, I wanted to pull 2 for comments, brief comments, items 11 and 15.
All right.
I'm sorry, sir, those are business items, so you'll have the chance to discuss
Okay, I
those in
thought they were in
detail.
consent.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have, the staff has has said that item number 34 on the consent agenda has been settled, and will be back on the January 23rd agenda as an acquisition. So do I have a motion for consent items 14 through 33 for approval?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Raise your hands. Raise your hands. I don't see the people that usually interpret for us, so. All right, so that is unanimous among the council. All right, so we have 2 items on our agenda tonight from the city manager, so now I will turn it over to Mr. Jones.
So, thank you, Mayor and members of council. As you may recall, we had our city assessor come to you earlier this year to give you an overview of the process in terms of the reval, and he will be back tonight to provide you an update of where he is and what he is seeing and his team. And then also, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we will have an update for the overview of the North Carolina opioid settlement. I do believe you had a pre-read that came out maybe today, but Ryan will provide you with that update. So, Mayor, unless there's any questions of me.
All right. We welcome you, Mr. Joyner. Thank you for the work that you and your team are doing.
Appreciate the opportunity to come back tonight. All right. So again, as manager said, we were here earlier this year, giving you basically just a simple overview of the process as City Council has changed over the years, and we just want to make sure everybody understood. And now we are back as we are approaching our appraisal date of January 1 of 2023, and wanted to provide you an additional update and some information relative to the city. So again, we do conduct revaluations in North Carolina at least once every 8 years. Our last one here in Mecklenburg County was in 2019. At the conclusion of 2019, the Board of County Commissioners advanced that to a 4-year cycle so that we could keep values closer to current market, keep our public, our government officials more educated on the revaluation process, and the hopes were to mitigate large increases seen over 8-year cycles. The purpose of the revaluation, redistribute the property tax base, keeping those as fair and equitable as possible, as certain values in certain areas will increase at different rates than others. Now, the most important thing here, I think, for our customers is that the revaluation is not a means to increase property tax revenue. Back in 2019, this council lowered their rate to a revenue neutral rate. So for those residents looking at 2023, it is not to increase property tax revenue. It is more a means of keeping them fair and equitable. So Mecklenburg County, as we reported the last time, was close to 400,000 parcels over the summer. We eclipsed 400,000 parcels. Our median sales price right now is $450,000. And when you look at our statistical numbers, our sales ratio, which measures our mathematical models, the values that we produce, divided by their market-related sales prices, we are right at 100%, 99.6, which is that target requirement by the statute. So right now, we're looking at a 52% increase, residential at about 60%, and commercial coming in at 39%. That is across the entire county. The city is a 51%, just slightly lower, 59% residential, 39% commercial. Now again, these values are subject to change. We will look at all transactions, all market transactions through the end of the calendar year, because our valuation date and our requirement is to hit the market at January 1. So we will be monitoring to see how the Fed changes that took place in November affect transactions all the way through December. So we are actively working on that process. Notification, review, and the appeal process, I think it's always important because I know that when the notices go out, all of the calls will not be to the county. City will receive those as well. So when the notifications are sent out, and right now we have backed that date from the end of January into sometime in mid-March, everyone will receive their notice of value. We'll mail those. Property owners at that point have the opportunity to review their information. They can, if they wish, file an informal review online, by mail, in person, or on the phone to our office. Last time around, we had about 30,000 informal reviews. The majority of those, I think a little short of 25,000, were done on our online portal, and we want that to be accessible and easy to use again. But we realize that not everybody is tech savvy, so we mail with the notice a form that they can mail back in to get that process started. We can accept people walking into the office. We will have staff available to sit down with them and walk them through the process, or by phone. And then the formal process, if during the informal review we are unable to find common ground and a common value, everyone still has that due process where they can file to go before the county's Board of Equalization and Review, or BER. That decision can then be appealed to the North Carolina Property Tax Commission. Out of the 30,000 informals, the 360,000 parcels, last time we had around 750 appeals go to the state. So a very small percentage go all the way to the state level. Some of the important questions. Do you need an attorney? No. As I tell my staff, no one knows the property better than the customer. So at the informal level, do we have your property characteristics correct? Do we have your square footage correct? Do we have the proper level of depreciation? Maybe they haven't updated their kitchens and bathrooms to the level of the transactions that are taking place in that neighborhood. They can work with us and get us pictures, and we can adjust that depreciation to make it fair and equitable for them. So especially during that informal process, I think it's best for everyone to just work through our office. Do you have to take off work? As we said, with the 24/7 online portal, you can send that information in. You can call, and we will try to call you back, but we don't want anyone to have to take off work during this part of the process. And then I think it's always good to say that there is no filing fee to do an informal review or a formal Board of Equalization and Review appeal. So this is what the notice will look like. We've got a lot of the template information in there, but it will give everyone their parcel number, parcel address, market value, and assessed value. We've added, and I didn't know what it was 4 years ago, but a QR code right here in the middle of the page. It'll take them directly to the page where they can look their information up. On the back of the notice, we talk about what is the notice, what is it doing, how are we going about the process, and we include that people can appeal for their value is substantially higher than market, their value is substantially less, we do get those sometimes, and there's inequity among similar properties to theirs. So those are your major reasons. Unable to pay your taxes, unfortunately, is not a valid appeal reason. We provide information on our relief programs, as we always try to do. Then, as I said, we're going to provide them with an informal review form. If they do not want to use the online portal, they can fill this out and mail it in to us. So it's just some simple questions here. They can tell us what they believe value is, provide an appraisal, comparable sales, issues that may be taking place with the property. So then we start our online, just a quick tour of the online system. So if someone goes with that QR code off of the front page, just switch to, here they take that parcel number, their name, their address, they enter it in, and that's going to pull up their property record. It'll have their value, a photo of the property, the aerial photo, and then at the bottom of the screen down there, you can see land, building, features, value changes more, tax bills, and then you've got compa over there. This will take them to all of the comparable sales within their neighborhood that we're using. That way, we want to be as transparent as possible throughout the process. If there's 15 sales, we're going to show all 15. They can then choose the ones that are most like their property. Here, they chose comp 1 and 2. You can see it gives them distance from their property, sale price, sale date, finished area, full bathrooms, full bedrooms, all of that information there that does provide that level of comparability. Here they can file their informal review, the button down there, and then they choose how do they want notifications from the system, by email or by text message, so they can file whichever one works best for them. Just a few simple questions: residential versus commercial, reason for your inquiry, square footage is incorrect, bedroom, bathroom count, recent appraisal, whatever their reason is, hit next. And they are in the system, and they're going to get a confirmation that they are in the system, because as it says here, it may take up to 4 weeks when we get those initial burst of informals. It's going to take some time. So we don't want everybody anticipating to get a call back. But you can see here on the side, they can talk with us. It's a chat feature. They can send us questions. We can answer, ask them questions. They can provide us files. This is where they can send us photos, engineering reports, appraisals, whatever information they have to us. And then the last 2 items, we're just going to, as we always do, talk about the relief programs. One of the most important functions that my office does is handling these. Our elderly or disabled exclusion program, January 1, deeded owner, North Carolina resident, 65 years of age or older, or totally and permanently disabled at any age. The income requirement for 22 is set by the state at $33,800. And I can tell you Mecklenburg County is again trying to get that income threshold raised and are hoping to get some support from around the state. And then our disabled veterans homestead, this one only excludes the first $45,000 to the home. Again, deeded residents as of January 1, North Carolina resident, honorably discharged, 100% disabled, service related, and there is no age or income requirement. And this one is a lower exclusion. In my career, it's been explained to me that any modifications to the home, the program is there to help keep someone from having to pay taxes on modifications made to their home. So our important dates, as we've mentioned, we're still in that community engagement. Right now, we've visited and spoke over 80 venues over the past probably 9 months. We're going to mail those notices in March. Informal appeal period begins. April will be the Board of Equalization and Review. They will start the acceptance of the formal appeals, and then that period will end in June. The acceptance, we will be hearing those appeals, if it's like 2019, all the way into early 2024. And then the first time these bills will be, or these values will be used, will be on those fiscal year 24 bills mailed in July. So at that point, I will turn it back over to the city, and I'm here to answer questions.
Thank you very much. It's always great to see this process unfolding, and I believe we have Mr. Driggs for a question or comment.
Mr. Joyner, thank you. So this review process goes on until 2024. The bills are mailed in July, and the payment date is the end of the year. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Without penalty? So if you have a pending process on an appeal, how much does that homeowner pay?
It is basically up to them. If they're in that formal appeal process, they can pay the full bill and get a refund after the process. They can pay to the value that they believe is correct, or they can pay nothing and wait until it is finally settled. There will be interest included on whatever value is finally there, but the statutes give them the ability to choose how they want to pay.
Okay. What are the actual determination dates, like the valuation as of when, and when was the last one effective?
January 1, the market on January 1 of 2023, and the last one was 4 years prior, January 1 of 2019.
Right. Do you have any impression yet of how diverse the rates of increase are like, the taxpayers see big changes in their tax bills if there was a huge difference in the rate of increase of, say, one type of property versus another. If everybody went up in unison, then people's tax bills would be pretty much the same. So
Right.
do you have a sense now of whether there will be large changes, particularly in lower income housing?
I would say information that we've seen, it would appear that there will be larger increases on the lower valued properties this time in comparison with the higher properties. We also see that commercial properties are not going up at the same rate as residential. So there will be a shift there. It's a matter of what area, certain areas are going up at higher rates than others.
And the last question has to do with the appeals. So in the past, we have tried to estimate our property tax based on the revaluation and the reset of the rate. But in fact, there has been a tail end of appeals pending. And that, in one instance, was big after the really bad revaluation. But do you have any idea of what the magnitude typically would be in a well-executed revaluation of those appeals and the possible adjustments?
I didn't when I got here. That was one of the first questions that I asked is, what is the typical appeal loss? And I got, well, the rule of thumb is, and the rule of thumb doesn't break it down to different regions and different areas and different values. So the last time through in 2019, we've got the level of appeal broken down by each municipality so that we know the final percentage of loss in value at the informal, at the formal level, at that conclusion at the state level, so that we can be in a better situation to provide factual information to the city when we provide those assessment estimates in the spring.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question.
All right, I want to recognize Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Joyner, for the presentation. So for clarification, the new site that you just shared with us, this goes live when?
This will go live as the notices are going out. They can get to that QR code area now, they just can't file an informal review until then. We're still working with the vendor. We've given them a list of enhancements. We're trying to improve on what we had the last time to make it easier and simpler for everyone. The list of questions to get into it has been shrunk. So it will not go live, the informal review portion, until the notices are in the mail. But the site, they can look up their property information where I showed you the physical characteristics of the property and all that. They can get to that information now. We just have not updated the sales data to the current sales data, and that too will be updated as the notices are mailed.
Question regarding the sales data. Did your office take into consideration the multiple purchases of corporations of single-family homes? Because if we're talking about house value, well, if I have a home that was built in the 30s, 40s, or 50s and have not been able to make beyond basic investments, new roof, windows, things like that, I haven't done an addition, but yet an investor came in and paid $250,000 to $300,000 over what was next to me, tore down, rebuilt, that sold. Was any consideration taken to the impact versus putting it on the homeowner to have to figure out how to maneuver the process? Because one of the challenges is if you have your property taxes paid through your mortgage company, the mortgage company gets the notice before you do. So the mortgage company will go ahead and pay it based on that September due date that you have versus some residents will pay January 2024
Right.
before the deadline.
Right. I will say that based on the statutes, we have to consider all of the transactions, even the ones from the corporations. We look at within each neighborhood, we're going to take all of those transactions and we're going to try to find that median, that middle ground. We're not going to use the highest sale price or the lowest. We're going to use that median. So in those neighborhoods, that's what we're trying to get to, is that fair and equitable and consistent value that we can use within the neighborhood. So we're not able to exclude corporation sales. Just as in 2019, in many of our areas, those, what you were explaining, where they pay that price and then they tear it down, in many cases, that becomes the land value in that area, because that's what people are now paying for the land. So we, as an office, will look at the transactions within that neighborhood. If there's homes that are selling and not being torn down that are maybe a little larger, we have to adjust and determine the size homes within that neighborhood that are being bought and torn down. And then even those larger ones, we have to put a significant amount of depreciation on those so that they're only accounting for that area that's above what is the typical tear down size. So we do a lot of analysis in those neighborhoods to try to not just add a value on top of it. And the older homes are going to have a significant level of depreciation over and above those newer homes coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good to see you again.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. That's actually a question I have is for the manager. You know, our residents, this is obviously a difficult time. It's a time period a lot of our folks, you know, have certain fears over. You know, when they see the tax value of their home can change 60%, you know, after they kind of reckon with that number, they want to know what can we do, you know, to stay in our homes. I think Mr. Joyner mentioned one policy decision that City Council made in 2019 with reducing the tax rate to virtually keep it neutral. I'm wondering if Mr. Jones, if you could speak to some of the work that City Council has done, or some other tools that the citizens might engage with the city with if they have certain concerns with increases in tax bills.
Sure. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I guess I would start off the last time that there was a reval. It had been more than 4 years, and there was a lot of concern about what we would call aging in place, individuals being priced out of their home because of the increase in the value. So whether you call it a success or a failure, I'm going to start off by saying that the City Council on 2 budget cycles set aside $1.5 million to help individuals stay in their homes. What was interesting, we combined with the county. I think actually you and Mr. Jarrell had a town hall meeting dealing with it. And we went out into the community, and I think we mailed something like almost 20,000 postcards, did a bunch of door knocking, things of that nature. But the uptake for it was about 142 unique households. So with the average payment being about a little bit over $500. So what occurred is that you roll that money over into what we call staying in place. And you have 3 pilots, and I remember 2 budget cycles ago, I would say the mayor and Ms. Johnson and Ms. Watlington, I had a lot of questions about how we could make sure that people could stay in their homes. So right now there's a pilot in 3 areas, Hidden Valley, Washington Heights, and Winterfell, where Sean, I believe, came to you almost a year ago and took some of the money that we had set aside in PayGo for housing. And it's about a little bit over $4 million. And there are different tools, so it's not just tax relief, but there's the comprehensive rehab housing, something, Ms. Mayfield, that you recall when you were on council the last time, emergency repair, acquisition, rehab, resale, ADU. So again, there are a lot of things that are happening now. While there are 3 neighborhoods, there could have easily have been 30 of them in this pilot. There is still, roughly half of that, $8.5 million still there, as well as what you have in housing from ARPA. So again, some things that have been tested, some opportunities to make sure that individuals can stay in their homes.
All right, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Jones, can you explain how residents in those neighborhoods would apply for those grants in those pilot neighborhoods?
Right, so, and I need to make sure that I acknowledge what Sherry Smith and Julia Martin and Sarah Hazel did in the past in order to have this community engagement. We really have partners right now. For instance, the United Way is supporting a quarterback agency to help get information out. Atrium Health is providing community health workers, something that we talked about last time that we were together. We talked a little bit, Sean did last time we were together, about Duke Energy. Once they're awaiting regulatory approval, but we can invest in energy efficiency retrofits across the entire community, as well as Lowe's Foundation is providing funding for community grant pools. So what I would like to do is lean on Sean maybe next time to be more specific, but there are grants out there. It's more than just, let's call it a supplement, for lack of better words, to address what's happening in terms of the assessments, but what are the things that people really need to stay in their homes? Sometimes it's a tree removal. That could be a costly tree removal that could be the difference in staying in your home and not. So again, we talked a couple of years ago about tools in the toolbox. We made the toolbox smaller, and we're seeing how these are working in those 3 pilot areas.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, this is sort of gentrification 101, right? So, and I was just looking at the statute, and I saw that, local municipalities are very limited on what we can do. But let's think about an area like Cherry. That's the one that comes to mind. And, I'm fairly new to the city. Well, I've been here like 7 years. But I was helping someone in one of the tax credit properties. And I saw a house for sale next door. And this was a tax credit property. And they told me the house was like $700,000. And I couldn't believe it, So let's say there's someone that's owned their home for 30, 40 years in that area, and houses in their area are selling. Is that being addressed? Is there, and I heard you mention depreciation on older homes. Are we considering that? And like Ms. Mayfield said, the corporate investors kind of inflated the market because they were able to pay thousands and thousands over list price. So I understand the state statute, but there has to be some consideration for that. So what tools does your office have to consider the economy here in Charlotte?
Well, I think the biggest issue is that the county is very limited in what they're able to do as well. The market value, determining that market value, we as an office have to ensure, and that's where we take this education process and getting out into the community very seriously, is we want everyone to understand they can file an informal review. These values are not final when that notice goes out. So if there are errors, we want to solve them. We want to get to what that fair and equitable value is. So we do 400,000 properties. There's no way I can stand here and tell you that we've done 400,000 assessments correct. So we've been out and visited all of the properties since 2014 to try to update those records and get everything as correct as possible. But if there's something that we're missing because we're walking the exterior of the properties, we're not going in, if there is additional depreciation on those homes, that's where we want to get that information so that we can get those values in those neighborhoods as fair for each of those customers as possible, because we know they're not going to be at the same level of those new homes. And really, in Cherry, it's a great example. The structure on there probably has no value at this point. Those older homes are there, and if they were to sell in our current market, whoever was buying them would probably remove the home and build something that you're seeing in the market today. And that is the problem, trying to live out and stay in your home while at the same time everything around you is just changing. So it is a major issue. And like the city's staying in place, the county started a homes program in 2019, and that program is still going forward. It is a grant program to help, and it helps any age. It's not just those that are 65 and older. It's at any age based upon your family size and what your income is compared to the AMI levels that the county has set through HUD. So that program, we're still, 4 years is still a new program. It is run through the Community Resource Center over at Valerie C. Woodard, the CRC. And we had the opportunity to talk with them and with the county management on how to set those grants at each revaluation. So I'm sure it will be tied to what the increases are in residential properties, so that we can at least, for those individuals, hold them harmless on what their increases are, at least up to what the median in those areas are. So it's a difficult situation because we all want our investment to go up in value. I think everybody buys a home hoping that it will one day bring them some financial gifts, but at a certain age, you're just wanting to stay in your property, and it just gets to where there is a huge burden there.
So do you know of other tools in other areas that consider like an explosive growth or fast-moving area? Are there other tools that we're limited that we're limited by because of state legislation? Are there programs in the country
Right.
that consider this type of growth and protect the legacy of folks that have worked, and this is their asset? It was interesting, and I know what you meant when you said there's no value, but these are people that have worked, and this is their home, and
Oh, exactly.
pride in paying that off,
Exactly.
and to leave that legacy for their family. So it's unfortunate that this market has caused their hard work to be of essentially no value.
Right.
So are there creative solutions or solutions from other places that you've heard of?
Well, you've got Proposition 13 in California, which basically sets your value at the price that you pay for it, and then increases are very minimal. And if the house next to you sells, they're now going to be taken to their market value. So you end up, there's a solution for certain people, but then there's others that it becomes more of a burden, because house next door sold 20 years ago, and you move into the neighborhood today and pay at the current market, you're paying a lot more. You're paying a portion of their services because you're as I would call it, the welcome neighbor. You moved in and you're now paying at a higher level. I think the solution that you're describing would take special legislation in North Carolina to look at neighborhoods that are going through the gentrification process to ensure that all considerations are given. and that's just not something right now that the statutes hold. And I'm not aware of any states that have programs like that, but I think it's something, you know, if we're going to think out of the box, that we need to start exploring is how do we handle the gentrifying neighborhoods outside of the normal process if we're going to be able to make any type of an impact there. Because just being held to raising those values to 100% of market value does nothing. You know, gentrification doesn't occur because the assessor's raising values. All it does is bring it to the forefront where everybody sees what is happening in those neighborhoods through whether it's corporate owners or other investors, or even just individuals who are buying a location and want to start their new home. So I think it's a very interesting idea that at least I heard parts of it from what you were describing. That is something that, you know, maybe we can look into and you know, till somebody comes up with an idea, it's just the same as it has been.
I'm in. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Joyner, thank you. I had an opportunity to go back and look at all your slides. Certainly the 59% increase, really that number jumps at me. But this number doesn't necessarily represent a property tax increase. I just wanted to make sure that that message is clear and loud. So we have seen some market change in past month or two. How does that factor into the reval process? And I've seen traditionally we would see the notices go out by end of the year or beginning of January. Obviously that has been adjusted, which is great. So I just want to, I'm trying to figure out if obviously there has been some slowing down in the market, especially with the high interest rate. So sales that happens in sort of November, December, January, February timeframe, how does that weigh into the overall increase and just the property revaluation? And hopefully that will give some homeowners some relief.
Right. Yeah, what you're describing, we discussed earlier. We have moved the notices back to March to allow us time to watch all of those market transactions up through December 31st. Our date evaluation is the market as of January 1, 2023. So we have to evaluate and look at and determine how these transactions in December that are probably mostly influenced by the 75-point basis increase that was made the first week in November by the feds, those are going to play out in December. So that's why we pushed the notices back, because unlike 2019, where we were just watching where the curve was going up and just trying to identify where it would be on January 1, we've got a different market. So we are pushing those back to try to evaluate all of those sales. We're working with some of our partners, SAS out of Cary, Spatialist, another company that we use, to help us identify changes that may be taking place in that market to help us determine adjustments that would need to be made. That's why we clarified 59%, that's just as of the end of November. We don't know what it'll be for January. So just trying to give you a point in time and reference at least, instead of just showing up the next time in the spring and saying, well, here's where we landed. So, but the increases are still significant. You know, we're still, even with the slowdown, we're seeing transactions that are well above what we saw even in 2020 and 2021. So it's still a situation of where we just want to take as much time and care to find the right landing place for those values.
Fair enough. So in your revaluation process, do does your team drive by or sort of survey all the parcels? How does it work? Because I know we have had one revaluation year of, that was a company from out of state where the property revaluation wasn't really aligning with what the market trend was. It was significantly higher, right? And I know that last time when the revaluation process took place, there were sort of more attention to ensuring that it truly, the property reassessed value truly reflects what the market is. So how many parcels that do you all sort of survey in your sample?
Well, since 2014, we visited every parcel in Mecklenburg County. There's a small number that we have not, but they're most likely parcels that have been created since last January 1. I think the last time I saw, we were somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3,000 parcels left. And some of those probably have new construction on them that we're visiting right now. So we will visit every parcel other than probably some of the vacant new parcels that have just been created so that we can ensure that we've got the most accurate information on there. But that's, again, what we were describing earlier is that I can't stand here and tell you that we're going to hit 400,000 parcels, correct? So that's where we want our customers to understand that the process is open and free to them to be a part of it so that we can land on the most correct value in every situation.
Got it. And that's where you need our residents' help with the informal review. I remember your team actually had done a town hall a couple of years ago where we invited residents to sort of walk them through informal review process, which was really hands-on, and a lot of residents did benefit from that, who were struggling with, because obviously not everyone can afford an attorney, right, to do informal review or to even submit an appeal. So that was very helpful. We certainly appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to have everyone that has not spoke yet, Mr. Driggs. Ms. Watlington?
I just got a couple of quick things. You already spoke to the recent sales and that impact. It sounds like if it was sold, that's the numbers that we're using, at least as a jumping off point. I wanted to ask, when it comes to, we talk about the vulnerability to displacement in certain neighborhoods. Also, an area that has come up has been this equity in assessments. Can you talk a little bit about what exists within Mecklenburg County's process that ensures equity in the assessments?
That's a great question. You're exactly right. Just like the entire appraisal profession right now, there's a lot of information out there trying to ensure that people are aware where there are inequities. We contracted with the School of Government last year to do a study on our informal and formal appeal process the last time to see if we were making equitable changes in value so that if we were not, we could put changes in place to try to do that. Probably the most glaring, and Brad, my assistant assessor's back there, he may even have some things from there that he would like to speak to, was the inequity in appeal rates, wherein higher end neighborhoods, you saw a greater number of appeals. They've got a greater means. They may hire an attorney. They may hire an appraiser. So we have made a point to try to go into as many of our lower income areas to talk about the process and what the informal review will do. We are in conversations with Habitat for Humanity, Dream Keys, to set up some forums after the notices go out, where we can reach customers in those areas and talk about the informal review. We've had conversations and we've not been able to finalize anything, even talking with the local Realtors Association and local appraisers about whether they would have volunteers there if someone was maybe less trusting of government, so that they could have someone with no skin in the game there that could walk them through what their value is. Here's the comparable data. And yeah, it does look like you might have a reason to appeal. So we're trying to take those steps to ensure, because I would love that when I walk away from the profession one day, that I can truly feel like that everyone had an equal opportunity to those equitable assessments here in Mecklenburg County. So that's a great question and probably something I should have brought up earlier.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you addressing it. My last question, and maybe it's more speculative, but as I think about the commercial property and coming out of COVID, we see a lot of office buildings now that are not getting necessarily the utilization rate. How do you think that this tax evaluation and the assumption of higher taxes in properties that may not be fully occupied, how do you think that might impact our vulnerability in the market?
Well, I can tell you that vacancy rates have gone up in offices across the county, but so have rents and other things. There's still going to be an increase in the office market. It's just not going to be the 77% that we saw back in 2019. It'll probably be more like 20 or 25%, somewhere in that neighborhood. So you're still going to see uptown going up at significant increases. It's just not going to be at the same level we're seeing residential properties at this point. But it is, you know, I got an email from the Wall Street Journal last week wanting to talk about the office market, that they had heard that they needed to talk with Mecklenburg because we hadn't made any changes since the pandemic, and wanted, and basically that values were going down. And we responded, and I was set aside some time. They never got back in touch with us. So the only thing I can think is that we didn't really fit their narrative of their story, because Mecklenburg is still, there's so many people still moving into the region. And so we're still seeing houses go up. We're seeing new construction and office structures, apartments, you name it, across the county. So they're not going up at the same levels that they were, but we're still trying to measure exactly where they're going to land.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's worth emphasizing, because there's a lot of apprehension whenever there's revaluation going on. If your property went up by 60% in value, your tax bill is not going to go up by 60%. State law requires, in fact, that we do a calculation, and we look at what the appreciation has been in the properties, and then we calculate a new tax rate such that the amount of tax that we collect is the same as before. And we have to disclose to the public what that number is. Council will then decide what the new tax rate is going to be with reference to that, but the public will be aware of what that number is. And just as an illustration, if your house went up by 50%, and that is the overall appreciation, your tax bill stays the same. If the value of your house went up by more than 50%, your tax bill goes up, and if it went up by less than 50%, your tax bill goes down. But as a number example, if your house doubled in value, your tax bill, because of the rate reduction, is actually only going to go up by about 33%. So we need to interpret this information carefully. If you happen to be a lower income owner of a home, then you're going to benefit from the appreciation of that home. And your net worth is going to go up. Your ability to move somewhere else is going to be assured, because you have a tie-in between the appreciation of the home you're selling and the one you want to buy. The people who get hit the hardest, frankly, are the renters, because they will see rents go up as those taxes are passed through in the rents, and they will not themselves realize any benefit from the gain in value of where they live. But we need to just navigate this whole landscape carefully and just try to make sure that the public understands, 60% increase in the value of your home doesn't mean a 60% increase in your tax bill. The other thing I did want to ask Mr. Joyner was, they're talking now about a recession next year. We could see a lot of volatility in the housing market. So is there any possibility of doing another reval less than 4 years from now?
No, sir. It took a good 2 years. We started in the summer of '20 with this revaluation, going through and establishing the neighborhoods. If we were in one of the states that had less intensive requirements on disclosure and showing exactly how you come up with the value, we could do annual assessments. We could go in very quickly and identify a neighborhood and move values, but North Carolina statutes, the way they are written, and we have to go through that schedule of values, trying to go less than 4 years, as I discussed with the county, would mean a significant number of new staff having to be brought on. And right now, we're having enough trouble filling the vacancies that we've got. So I think that what we've got is, once those values are established, it will be that point in time as the equitable distribution. And then 27, wherever that market is, we'll do it all over again at that point in time.
I mean, given what we went through 10 years ago, I appreciate your thoroughness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joyner. We're looking forward to this process. Ryan will be very busy, the manager will be very busy, and all of us as well, working to keep affordability in the forefront and fairness as well. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Our next presentation is an overview of the North Carolina opioid settlement. I believe you got some information on that today, and Ryan's going to present that to us.
I see it, Amanda. Yeah. All set? All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Ryan Bergman, Budget Director. I'm going to talk to you tonight about opioid settlement funds that the city has received. I just have 5 slides for you. We did send you yesterday a pre-read with some information, and we wanted to send it to you online because there are a number of different links to the state website for more information on a number of these. Okay, so there was a nationwide settlement agreement for opioids. The state of North Carolina signed on to that agreement, and then the state of North Carolina turned around and created a MOA for local governments to receive funding from this. I want to thank the city attorney and his staff who has taken the lead on making sure that we receive the funds. We did have council approve the MOA last year, and we now are at a point where we've received the first year of funds. Might have went too far there. Okay, so let me walk you through the funds quickly. The state of North Carolina received $750 million. Of those funds, they sent 85% of them to local governments. Now, the local governments, all 100 counties received funds and only 17 cities. And that would be the 17 cities that have a population of more than $75,000. So you'll see the disproportionate nature between the counties and the cities here, where the counties received 96% of the funds. And that's really a result of the nature of what these funds are for opioid services, which in many regards is more of a social services public health, court system type issue, which is more closely aligned with what counties do. So on the right there, you'll see Mecklenburg County, which of course helps our residents as well, will receive $32 million over the 17 years. The city of Charlotte will receive $8 million over the 17 years. And you'll see it's kind of a disproportionate payment schedule. We did receive our biggest chunk already this calendar year. Then we'll receive another $500,000 the next calendar year. And it kind of trickles down by 2026 through 2038. Our average over that time frame is $472,000. Okay, so details on some of the allowable uses. The state MOA defined allowable uses for local governments, and they had it into two different categories. Category A and Category B. So Category A are the already pre-approved, evidence-based programs that we are able to do now. If we wanted to do something with some of the option B categories, we would have to go through a pretty extensive collaborative process to be able to access those, to prove that's what the community wants, to prove that they're evidence-based, and things of that nature. And for the most part, the option B categories aren't terribly different. They're just more narrowly defined. And we did include a link to them in the pre-read if you want to look at it. But if you look at the option A uses, you'll see 12 different pre-approved categories, and I just wanted to highlight two of them. So this is just a staff note. The city could use its funds in any of those categories, but when we looked at it, we did see that there are two categories that seem to be more closely aligned with some of the work that the city does, as opposed to some of these social services, public health, court system work that might fit some of the other categories. And you'll see recovery housing support and employment-related services. And so you can see with the recovery housing support, as long as it's treating opioid disorders, we would be able to partner with somebody to provide rent, move-in deposits, utility support, down payment assistance. And for employment-related services, again, as long as it's wrapped in with opioid recovery, we would be able to do things such as job skills and job training. So the last slide here talks about the advantages of working through a partner. As I mentioned, at $470,000 on average, the city's allocation would be at risk of being watered down if we had to create a new program with staff and overhead. And so the state MOA kind of accounted for that fact, and they actually wrote into the MOA that cities do have the option of providing their funds to the county. They can do it in a way that is all future funds go directly to the county, or they can do it through an interlocal agreement. There's certainly advantages to us doing it that way. The county has some of the reporting infrastructure because they do social services and public health already. We do have some history of collaboration with them, especially recently, thinking of the Alternatives to Violence program, which is really the other direction where, because it's more closely aligned with us, they provided us $250,000 that we would then report on. If not the county, we could try to find a nonprofit partner. Ideally, it would be a nonprofit partner where our funds would be concentrated on the beneficiary rather than staffing, if we could do it that way. It would involve more extensive reporting requirements for us. I can tell you that we tried to look at some of the bigger cities and what they've done so far on this. I can tell you that Raleigh and Cary and Gastonia have already made public declarations to give their funds to the county in the future, into their county. There's at least two more that I'm not going to say because they haven't formally done it, that look to be going that route. There's a couple that look like they're going to partner with nonprofits, And then there's a whole group of them where they're not entirely sure what they're going to do yet because they also haven't talked to council. These funds, it actually says in the MOA, they were sort of intentionally designed for a collaborative approach. There's not a end date on these funds. And so there's no ask tonight other than feedback. This is something that we could incorporate into a budget process. This is something we could bring back sooner, depending on what you guys wanted to do. But I'll go ahead and stop there for questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Any comments on the program as well as how the city might administer the grant funding? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. So in this age of fentanyl and synthetic analogs is not going anywhere. The street supply is heavily contaminated, and it is more difficult than ever for people who use drugs to meet the current parameters for most treatment centers, housing organizations, as well as other public assistance. I think our city should seek creative and helpful ways to support people in active use by offering them care that meets their most physiological needs, such as housing, food, shelter, unconditional of their regard. There are progressive models found in other areas of the nation, which include respite housing and alternative group homes that have more inclusive and safe policies and procedures that offer critical safety nets for people who use drugs and who are also experiencing homelessness as well as other co-occurring conditions such as justice involvement and mental health illnesses. The Center for Prevention Services and Queen City Harm Reduction are currently piloting a harm reduction housing first model to do exactly this. I think we should turn our attention to these experts in substance use, prevention, and evidence-based care in order to effectively find ways to offer sustainable solutions that support the overall well-being of our most vulnerable citizens. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Ajmira?
I didn't know I was next, but excuse me. So in previous slide, Ryan, you had shared with us really the two areas that really aligns with what City Council does, housing and the employment support. So even if we were to focus our efforts on this too, would it require additional hiring of staff, Mr. Jones?
So Councilmember Ashmore, what Ryan has provided is a pathway forward that would not require additional hiring of staff if we, if you determine how you'd like to deploy the funds and which buckets, and we either use a nonprofit or we use the county.
Okay, so I understand that if we go with a partner, we don't have to hire a staff member, right, to support. But I guess I'm trying to figure out if we focus our efforts on housing and employment-related services that we already have, that we already provide, do we still require additional hiring of a staff?
Yeah, I'll let
Okay.
Ryan go into that a little bit about, because there are reporting requirements that we would have
Oh,
to
got
do.
it.
Yeah, because it's so closely aligned with opioid treatment, we did talk to staff. We don't feel that we have anyone on staff right now that could do the extensive that it would take for these programs.
Got it, okay. Well, I understand in terms of the reporting requirements, so I'm okay with having us utilize a partner that aligns with our goals, as long as the council sets the goals that here is how we would like these funds to be spent, and then have an oversight. I'm okay with us leveraging a partner to do that, especially county, because this is what they do every day, health and human services, and that's what they're good at. So I'm okay with us going that route. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So for a little bit more clarification, you stated that a number of cities have already decided to transfer the funds to the county, since the county services.
Yep.
Do you know if there was any conversation? So for me, what I'm considering is, the county seems like a natural partner, but since we do have some very specific goals, do you know if in some of those other areas, their council had some very specific requests with the funding prior to transferring it over to make sure that the goals were being identified and being met?
So for Cary, Raleigh, and Gastonia, who have done it already, I'm not aware of anything public. We will check on that, but what I would say is that the way that staff has kind of envisioned this, it would be us approaching the county the way you guys would like, if that's the route you wanted to take, where we could try to define it. I mean, the way that this is set up, there are predefined areas, and as long as you're sticking in those areas for your recommendation, it would seem to be something that they could report on fairly easily.
So would the conversation move from tonight, Mr. Manager, hearing from council, and then you staff will go and start those conversations with the county based on the parameters that's already been set? Or will there be an opportunity for this council, since those parameters were set by previous council, for this council to have a update of, here's where we identified priorities, this council say, here in that parameter that we agree with, then you go and speak with the county?
So I'll jump in. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Mayfield. As Ryan said earlier, the county has been a great partner with their alternatives to violence, where, we're taking the lead and they're coming along. I did have a conversation with the county manager. They were ready to have a agreement on their docket tomorrow. But I said, we really have to have this conversation first. And Dina was very clear that if you chose the county, they would allocate the funds in the manner in which you desired.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Manager, and thank you for answering the questions. If we're going to have an actual vote, if not, if it's just to feel the energy from the council, I do support the idea of us working with our partner, which is Mecklenburg County.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. Any other comments, Ms. Mayfield? No, ma'am. Okay. All right, Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ryan, for giving us a great report. Just a follow-up on the first one. You say the allocation for 2022 we have already received?
Correct. We've received the allocation, the $987,000. We have not appropriated it or spent it or anything.
And Madam Mayor and Council, one thing that could be helpful for us is I think we're going to have the state of CMPD in January. Would be nice to get feedback from them. Where has been some of the hot spots for opioid, issues facing our community, and what do they see some of the trends? I think having their input can help guide us on what would be priority areas for us.
Okay. All right, next I have Mr. Graham.
Thank you, madam. Do you want to say something, Mr. Manager?
Yeah, so,
Go ahead.
Mayor, I just want to make sure that I don't misspeak. One of the reasons why the county was ready to queue things up tomorrow is, and I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, there was a concern, and they have been working with legal, so thank you, Patrick, is there's some concern about making a declaration of where the money goes before January of each year. So there could be a situation, again, I'm not 100% sure, that we may have to do something special to get that $987,000 to them. But I just didn't want that to be left without speaking. We're trying to figure out how that works.
And if I can just mention one clarification on that. The $987,000, we can still give to the county. The first year, we would have to do the reporting on it. They would essentially be a subrecipient. It's the next year and every year after that where we could essentially pass a resolution that allows it to go straight to the county for every year thereafter. But I should mention that city council would be able to get out of that at any point. So in 5 years, if you decide you want to do something different with it, you would be able to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to lend my voice also to supporting one of the windfall, right? And then secondly, the recurring nature of it every year. And there are a lot of discussions around the dais relating to some of the issues that we can use the money for that are not really in the city's wheelhouse, but certainly the county has the expertise, the know-how, the resources, and the manpower to deliver the service. So I think that's the right way to go, as long as we can direct the funds, because sometimes around this dais, there's a lot of specific requests that falls within the zip code of the usage of the dollars that goes well beyond the two that was listed, because I think all of them are allowable usage, right? You just highlighted two.
Yeah, we just highlighted two. We don't have a full plan from the county, but presumably the county, who gets 4 times more than we do to begin with, will be heavy in a lot of these different areas.
Some of the other areas, yeah, because I know we talk a lot about reentry programs, and we talk about, at least I do, in reference to single-room occupancy housing, which is putting money into building affordable housing at the lower end. And so as long as council every year has the ability to kind of send a earmark where we want the funds go, I feel very comfortable with that. And or if there's a specific nonprofit organization like the United Way that we do a lot of work with on some of these same programs, I think that would be, I would support that as well. Thank you.
Mr. Bakari?
Thanks. I'm in general agreement with the sentiment I think we've heard, which is for the city to approach the county. I would just give 2 little asterisks, because I think there's going to be some deal making and deal structuring that needs to happen here, and I think you'll lead with on the right foot, given that we're kind of proactively going with a relatively large chunk of money to our partner, that something is in their wheelhouse and not in ours. And we've had these conversations. There are more opportunities to do this, and I think number one, I'm hopeful this is a bit viewed as an olive branch for us recognizing their expertise and us not trying to reinvent a wheel or give a nonprofit some money where we can all get together and structure some shared outcomes that we care about. And so I think number one is there, while figuring out, where can this conversation lead in other topics that might go on the other way on that road. And then 2, this is a long-term thing, not amounts of money to balk at an important topic. I think you kind of probably want to structure it in a way where you start down this path, but you have kind of milestones and measurements where we all come back and we can take a look and readjust as necessary to make sure that, Mecklenburg has a wide scope of concerns. We are focused on Charlotte. There's a lot of different needs that probably will be different as years change. So just the ability for us to partner with them and adjust those things based on the scope of where the money came in versus us executing it.
So Mr. Bakari just expressed my first point about the collaboration and the understanding of our roles and the responsibilities that we have with the county. And this is an opportunity for us to actually work in a way that really improves this process for all of us at the same time. And then the other thing I think about this is that when we talk about who the clients are, you don't want them to have to go to 2 portals to get services. And that's a lot of times what happens when we divide things up. They say, oh, you have to go to the county for this, and then you have to go to the city for that, or you have to go someplace else. So it's tough enough to be in this vulnerable situation, as the Mayor Pro Tem has said. So I think when we look at this, it ought to be really with the true commitment to collaboration and strategic planning, the real meanings of these words. And that's because we have to do this for people that need it so desperately. And we should make it and think about this from a client-centered approach. How do you make sure, I think the Mayor Pro Tem, no harm. It's tough, and we need to have some expertise, milestones, measurements, I think are just in every aspect of our work now. We ought to be doing that. And so unless there's additional comments, I think that we actually, I'm sorry, did, Mayor Pro Tem? Ms. Molina?
Just really quickly, if I did say anything for being redundant, but I just would say that this is a great idea. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you, first of all, Madam Mayor. But thank you for the presentation. I just, particularly in District 5, I've been talking to the colleagues that will eventually be working closest with me, which is Commissioner Mark Jarrell and the school board member. And what I've heard from the people who I represent specifically is that the average human that we deal with on a regular basis who gives us their opinions, they aren't, thinking of civics when they have an issue. They just know that someone represents them. And so what they feel when they contact one of us, even if they're contacting the person that they shouldn't be, is that this person can resolve my issue. And so I am very heartened to see us, extend this olive branch to our partners in the county. And I am absolutely on board with allowing them to do what they do best and, set some deliverables that can help our constituents and our city and county know that, we're a united front with different deliverables, but we're here to work together.
I think, Mr. Jones, you're hearing a sentiment to go in that direction. I think having the conversations and coming back with something that's more specific around the priorities that the council have aligned, that would be very helpful as we do that and a step forward. I think this is the very first time that we've had a workshop since Ms. Molina joined the council that we actually have time to walk down the stairs, time to start on time, and actually do it with some grace instead of like running out from the back of the room to the dais. So I appreciate that very much. I think the conversations tonight have been exceptionally well done and stated. So thanks, everyone. Maybe it's the holiday spirit or Christmas is coming, or maybe it's just that we're just beginning to meld together, and that's really good. I think also we have the opportunity to talk about this a little bit more in our housing and jobs conference, because that's where we can have some impact for people that need a place to live and a job to keep them up. So, okay, we're going to go downstairs and start on time, guys. Thank you so much. thank you for joining us today for the December 12th Charlotte City Council Business Meeting. We appreciate those that are joining us in the chamber, as well as those who are watching this meeting virtually. I'm now going to call this meeting to order, and we will begin with introductions, and we'll start with, around the dais, we'll start with Ms. Watt, District 3.
Good evening. Victoria Watlington, District 3.
Tark Bakari, District 6.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Mayor Pro Tem Braxton Winston.
District 4.
Good evening, everyone. James Mitchell at large.
Good evening, everyone. Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Good evening, Stephanie Kelly, City Clerk.
Happy Monday, Dimple Ajmera at large. All right, thank you. We begin our meetings with an expression of inspiration, and this is a opportunity for one of our council members to help us center ourselves as we begin this meeting. We understand that we're trying to solemnize our own deliberations and recognize that our community is very diverse in religion and faith, as well as those without religious faith. And so tonight, if you choose to participate, feel free to do so. And I want to recognize Councilmember Graham to give a message to us this evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a quote from the book of Dr. Benjamin Mays, former president of Morehouse College. I did take the liberty to amend it slightly to add women in the appropriate places. God, give us men and women. A time like this demands strong minds, great hearts, true faith, and ready hands. Men and women who the lust of office does not kill. Men and women who the spoils of office cannot buy. Men and women who possesses opinions and a will. Men and women who have honor. Men and women who will not lie. Men and women who can stand before demagogues and damn his treacherous flatteries without winking. Tall men and women, sun-crowded, who live about the fog in public duty and in private thinking.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. We now go to our Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand if you wish.
This one.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin our meeting, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Mayfield for a special message this evening.
Happy holidays to everyone and to my colleagues. We have one more meeting, so I would like to encourage all of us who will be in attendance to wear a holiday sweater or something festive, including the antlers if you feel so. I see Councilmember Ajmera has on a holiday sweater, and I do, but it will be just a great sign since we're working, and that is unusual. Since we're going to be working next Monday, it would be great if we have on something holiday-ish.
All right, so you've heard that request. We will not be voting on that
I
request.
think she's just got a normal sweater on.
It's got red, blue, and black in it. It's close enough.
Okay, it works. Ms. Ajmera is doing fine, okay. All right, so we now are going to declare our next
Thank you for your
business.
suggestion, Mr. Bukhari, that was not invited.
I will now wear something ridiculous. Oh, Ed has seen this suit that I am thinking of wearing.
Oh, my gosh.
No pajamas are allowed. Okay, thank you all very much. And now we will go to our public forum where we have people from the community that would like to address the council as a whole. And these speakers will have 3 minutes each to speak to us. Our practice is to have you speak and to have our staff take notes for it and to look at what you've asked for or to address the issue that you have and send you a reply through the city clerk's office with the information that you provided for us later on this week. It may be a little bit later this year, in the next couple of weeks, but you will have a communication as a result of coming to speak to the council. So our first speaker is Ms. Ryle. Please come down to the podium and to address us. Right here, just go around, yeah. And on this side, we can have Mr. Saljuskovic over on this side. So please come down here. I hope I didn't do too badly.
No worries.
Thank you. I will worry, but that's okay. Thank you. Okay. All right, Ms. Rao?
Good evening, esteemed members of the Charlotte City Council. I, Sneha Priya Rao, would like to thank you all for allowing me to speak about the issue of Hindu phobia, which has negatively been impacting my community. Hindu Americans seek what every American seeks: freedom to practice our traditions, safety to provide for our families, and acceptance in society. Today I come here because I observe that Hinduism is being demonized in the media and our educational system, while attacks on Hindu places of worship and bigoted hate incidents are being ignored. I'm here as a concerned Hindu American mom and a resident of Charlotte who is witnessing the rise of Hindu phobia. What exactly is Hindu phobia? Hindu phobia is a set of antagonistic, destructive, and derogatory attitudes and behaviors towards Sanatan Dharma, Hinduism, and Hindus that may manifest as prejudice, fear, and hatred. Hindu-phobic rhetoric reduces the entirety of Sanatan Dharma to a rigid, oppressive, and regressive tradition. Pro-social and reflexive aspects of Hindu traditions are ignored or attributed to outside non-Hindu influences. This discourse actively erases and denies the persecution of Hindus while disproportionately painting Hindus as violent. Though these stereotypes are used to justify dissolution, external reformation, and demonization of the range of indigenous Indic knowledge traditions known as Sanatan Dharma. One example I can give you is recently there was an attack on a Hindu temple in New York City where a Gandhi statue was demolished and the word dog was scrawled across. What people might not know is the word dog is a slur for Hindus. Another example is there was a recent study published by the Network Contagion Lab, which showed a rise in the word on social media spaces by supremacist groups. The word was Pajit, and this is also a slur for Hindus. I have a 4-year-old daughter who is growing up in this world, and I am also a Hindu American mom, and I'm concerned about what environment she's going to be growing up in. As a child, as a teenager after I immigrated to the US, I experienced a lot of Hindu phobia. Today I'm here wearing a bindi, but for a long time I took off the bindi because I experienced a lot of discrimination and targeting. And I was very attracted to social justice and progressive ideas, feminism and LGBTQ rights, because I had hoped that Hindus would be included in that narrative. Our colonial history, our colonial struggles would be included in that narrative. But what I'm finding is, in fact, it's the social justice space that is creating Hindu phobia by claiming that Hinduism is inherently casteist and inherently discriminatory.
All right,
I want to say that Hindus are not obviously perfect.
Thank you very much for your remarks. Thank you very much for your remarks. We have everyone, to be fair to everyone, to have 3 minutes. And so I think you can sign up to come back again after a certain amount of time.
If I may just say one more thing, I gave you a definition of Hindu phobia.
I am so sorry. We do have to follow our rules of
course.
conduct for everyone. And as much as I'd love to hear more from everyone, we have to make sure that we get to the city's business as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
I want you to know that in our value system, in this organization, we believe that respect and dignity belongs to every person and every group that's in our whole environment and what we do and see. So thank you for sharing that information with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Mr.
Suljatovich, yeah. Huge stage fright, so disclaimer. Good evening, esteemed Madam Mayor, excuse me, and council members. My name is Jason Stulitovic, and I live in District 7. I would like to bring an awareness to an issue that is affecting 47% of the Queen City's population, a housing crisis and almost a complete lack of landlord accountability, leaving almost half of the city's population in a constant state of David versus Goliath battle. And here, David will always lose. According to an August report from Rent.com, our state has seen an almost 60% increase in rent prices. In 2021, rent averaged at $935, but as of 2022, that price is at $1,470 to over $2,000 for two-bedroom units. As North Carolina does not have rent control laws, us tenants are left at the mercy of our landlords or companies, and rare are the tenants that get any mercy. Those of us coming up on renewals have limited to no options, and we must agree to a 20% default increase if we want a place to live. However, neither of those increases are providing upgrades to the quality of life for the tenants, or even mold-free and sanitary homes. In your folders, you will see pictures of Bexley Crossing at Providence, owned by Virginia Property Corporation, and the conditions of my unit at move-in date, AC issues which ruined me and my mother's first encounter since I moved to the U.S., the plastic bucket placed in her bathroom, and unsanitary condition of our breezeways, as well as the email correspondence with the property. Please note these are the living conditions in a luxury community whose parent company receives around $10 million and $200,000 from North Carolina tenants alone. My property alone receives $50,000 in trash fees, more than our teachers and police officers are paid on a yearly basis. As of 2022, 44% of Charlotte's median income is going towards rent. How is this money not monitored, and how are tenants charged more and more with each renewal with no end in sight? It seems like we're targeting $3,000 by 2024. This mistreatment, tenant exploitation, and retaliation are just one example of what Charlotte tenants are dealing with on a daily basis. If we bring the aspect of racial bias and inequity to this, we'll stay here all night. Several Better Business Bureau complaints indicate racial bias present, which resulted in baseless overnight evictions, irreparable credit damage, and an inability to buy a home. This is without bringing into discussion the issue of homelessness of former felons, as presented by Ms. Shaquila Pickens on November 28th. It is beyond worrisome that as consumers, we can easily remediate solutions and get our money back with almost any business, but we have almost zero control when it comes to the most important part of our lives, our home and our sanctuary. A landlord or a company can impact our lives and homes with a bat of an eye, with very little resources for 47% of us living in Charlotte. It is my hope, esteemed Madam Mayor and members of the Council, that this will initiate an active and ongoing discussion and presence in the public discourse in order for the city and state to reach some steps to help half of us who are at the mercy of our landlords that unmonitored can alter the lives of half of our city. Thank you for your time, and I wish everyone the most wonderful holidays.
Thank you very much for your presentation and the clarity of your documentation that you provided to us. This conversation has started. It's not an easy conversation. It's a very difficult conversation, as you're aware. We wish the very best for all of our residents, safe and decent housing, and sometimes we don't really get to that point, and it takes a lot of us. So thank you for coming down and sharing the information.
You're welcome.
Tonight.
Thank you for your time.
All right, our next speaker is Albago. Please come down, and if Stephanie Shine Morrison would come to the other podium.
I think that's Alboga.
I know, yes. What did I say?
Albago?
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
That's great.
Mr. Driggs is helping me out tonight, okay?
God bless you, Ms. Mannix.
I need all the help I can get on most nights around here. So, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm from Beatties Ford Road area. I'm owner of Biowise Beauty Supply. I've been in that location for 23 years. We see the up and down in that area. I'm here for safety for that area. It's getting deteriorated with the neighborhood all. From homeless and drugs and safety, the businesses is leaving the area. We're getting to very dangerous situation. To my business and other business right there, it's getting to the point where we're shutting down. The homeless and the drugs and the safety, we know how that area is going up and down from, let's say Johnson Smith University all the way to the 85. I've been 23 years. We see the good and we see the bad. And hopefully, right now we want it to be good, but it's going down. I've been calling the police from many times a day, but they cannot do anything, unfortunately, because the situation with the homeless is it's deteriorated. I've been dealing with her and many businesses dealing with them. and there's no end to it. After that, we know how the scenario, first of all, the homeless, then second, supplying the drug, and after that, the crime happened. Then you guys come in, and the media come in. Hopefully, we prevent all that right there from happening, addressing the safety of that area right there. It's never ended. We struggling, and people in Beatty-Ford deserve more than that, believe me. You guys know it more than me. The people in that neighborhood deserve to be good as any neighborhood in Charlotte. We don't see that one. It's not the police a problem, it's you guys also a problem. We elected you to see this, resolve this problem for the community and for the businesses. There's no business, you cannot track businesses to open in Beatty-Ford Road right now. And the people, there's nothing for the people who live there, no business. We don't see any restaurant. Where's family restaurant for that area particular? There's nothing. Every business is, me too, I've been in 23 years in that location. This is my first year I have lost money on it. And if it's going to be like this, might as well just put the plywood on my window and shut it down. But where are we ending it? So we need hopefully help from you guys with the homeless situation, with the drug problem, because it's never ending. After that, when you have the homeless and we feel sorry for them. We want to help him. But how, we want to prevent that from happening. The area is not, improving. You guys bring a couple of businesses, good, businesses for a corner in LaSalle and Beatty-Ford, Bank of Chase Bank. But where is the small business for serving the community? We don't have anything like that, never growing. 23 years I've been there and never growing.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We'll have
Very
someone
much.
contact
And I
you
appreciate for you
in
hearing
regards
from
to
me.
the problems that you presented to us. As you said, all of us around this dais understand these issues.
Okay, I appreciate all the help. We'll see how-
And thank you for expressing them
Thank
to
you very
us
much,
in
ma'am.
a very personal and conscious way of doing it. Thank you very much. All right. Our next speaker is Ms. Morrison.
Hello. Good evening, Council and Mayor. I'm Stephanie Shawn Morrison, owner of Alternative Living Solutions of North Carolina. It's outpatient mental health and substance abuse company. And I've come today because, like the gentleman that just left here, I was born and raised here in Charlotte, North Carolina, off the west side, Beatty-Ford Road. And like everyone before me has said, it's a lot of homeless issues. And I come to let you guys know that my company, I've been asking for funding and applying for funding, but of course, I've been overlooked. Small businesses don't get as much attention as larger corporations. So we provide outpatient mental health, dealing with serious mental health issues, housing. We partner with other housing outside of Section 8, such as Targeted Unit Housing Program. We provide non-emergency medical transportation, home health, and also case management services here in Mecklenburg County and surrounding areas. And we just have a lot of people not only homeless, but they're homeless due to their mental health issues. So it's not just because they can't keep housing or they don't want to work. It's dealing with serious mental health issues, and they don't have the resources to back them up. You may have them placed in housing, but who is there to make sure they stay housed? We have a lot of people in my program that get housing and they get put out because their mental health is not there. And then they have nowhere else to go, and they're starting from ground zero again. So we provide those services, but we don't always have the means for the in-between time, meaning while they're on the waiting list, where's the temporary services that they can get? Where's the additional help they can get without being on the waiting list? They can, of course, contact area mental health or Novine or whoever, but they may not be able to be seen until 3 or 4 months later. And then next thing you know, the suicide rate goes up. Well, we have people like myself and other small businesses that gets overlooked for the funding for it, and therefore you have your suicide rate go up, your homeless rates goes up, and we provide all these additional services for the community. So that's why I'm here today to let you guys know that there are other companies out here that does provide these services, and they are here to help individuals get housed, and not just housed, but stay housed for the long term, not just short term. And in between time, there's help, and even while they're in their long term. Again, we are partnered with the Targeted Unit Housing Program, and it's for individuals that's living with Social Security and Social Security disability income, and individuals making $300 or less a month.
Thank you very much for sharing your information and your
Thank
business
you.
progress as well. All right, our next speaker is Tina Hall. Ms. Hall? Tina Hall? All right, our next speaker is Tawana Bird. I hope I said that close enough. And she is followed by David Hines. Mr. Hines here tonight? There you are. Thank you, Mr. Hines. Please, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor Bowles, Pro Tempore Winston II, Charlotte City Council members, as well as staff. My name is Tawana Bird, and I reside in the Municipality Ward of District 1, and I've reached out to most of you at some level before. Just a little bit about me. I've been in the nursing profession for 24 years, so a little over half my life, and then practicing anesthesia for half that time as a certified registered nurse, anesthesiologist, or CRNA. I am a very active and concerned constituent, and my purpose this evening is to ensure that our elected officials are aware of some of the safety and equitable housing concerns happening in our community, like a lot of us here. Being a single Black female who is a survivor of a 2020 sexual assault after being drugged in my very small NODA condo building, I truly value our CMPD and resources that are not only locally but federally in place for the community's protection. But I'm concerned when some of these resources fail us or seemingly banned when we are not allowed to implement basic measures because of an invasion of privacy. I know no greater invasion of privacy than a raped vagina. Excuse my transparency. Moreover, a particular group of people, Black women, is being continually compelled to move from this Charlotte neighborhood despite multiple cries for help. I appreciate the aid of Councilman Eggleston at the time when I felt threatened by CMPD and no support for my safety at that time. Yet an even greater concern lies when I felt forced to leave my home over safety on May 9th. Despite filing a fair housing violation as put in place for certain situations, I am left with concerns of whether commercial real estate landlords and developers, and in this particular case, Latt, Purser and Associates, LPA, could have been influential to the decision makers, Willie Ratchert, at our local HUD office on Parkwood Avenue. Latt, Purser and Associates had an active, affordable housing and HUD project in progress, and is also a major part of our community and our condominium association where these issues are occurring. I respect each entity and every judicious or jurisdictional decision, but there are checks and balances, especially in government, for a reason. Fair housing and safety has been long-standing issues. All fair housing issues do not always follow the typical template either. My understanding that there are city council committees instilled by Mayor Vi, consisting of housing, safety, and community, as well as budget, governance, and intergovernmental relations. And I feel we would greatly appreciate it if a closer look is taken at what is potentially happening in these programs. Thank you so very much for your time. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. We will follow up with you. Thank you very much. All right.
For new council members,
who don't know me, my name is David Hannes. For the past 13 months, I've been trying to get the street I live on classified properly to prevent the construction of a fire station on it. Except for Councilmember Watlington, no one else on the previous council thought Woody Point Road deserved their attention. I hope this new council is more open-minded. While I realize that Woody Point Road is not a hot-button topic or issue, it is of vital importance to the city and its reputation. Its improper classification by the council will adversely affect the lives of hundreds of residents on this street. Woody Point Road is a state-owned, quiet, narrow, tree-lined, dead-end, strictly residential street approximately 1 mile long in southwestern Mecklenburg County. It fits the zoning ordinance's definition of a local street precisely. The Charlotte zoning ordinance strictly forbids commercial land development on a local street such as Woody Point Road. According to CDOT, it's the council's responsibility to correct this mistake to protect Woody Point Road from improper land use and development that the present classification would allow. I don't understand why the council refuses to investigate this situation. In over 12 months of looking into this situation, I can't find a shred of evidence to support the zoning administrator, CDOT, and planning's contention that Woody Point Road is a collector street. If I felt the city was justified in their actions, I would not have spent the last year fighting this injustice. No matter how many times the city declares Woody Point Road is a collector street, it doesn't make it one. A lie is still a lie, and the truth should matter to the council. In my efforts to resolve this situation, I've invited numerous officials to come to Woody Point Road, meet with me, and explain to me why Woody Point is a collector street. They all ignored my invitation, and they all ignored my invitation. I don't understand why these officials are so intent on destroying Woody Point Road and why the council refuses to act. The city is supposed to have a code of ethics that its employees are bound by, and these actions by city officials go way beyond violating this code. This is my 4th visit to council, and no one but Ms. Watlington has even questioned what the city is doing to Woody Point Road. It's very frustrating to see the disinterest by council members for such an important issue. Not one question has been asked of me in all of my visits to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hans, I just want you to know we'll continue to communicate with you, and thanks to Ms. Watlington for reaching out, but often among the council, because she's very familiar with her district and what she does, that's one of the reasons that she has this ability to connect on this, and also she can continue to communicate with the remaining members of council as well. So give us a little bit of grace, and we'll continue to communicate with you, and Ms. Watlington will, I'm sure, continue to work with you as well.
Can I say one quick thing? Just very quick. The Charlotte Fire Department and the Steel Creek Volunteer Fire Department are actually in negotiations right now to try to move the fire department, but the street classification is still a problem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hand. All right, so that is the end of the speakers list, Madam Clerk. Is that everyone? Thank you, everyone, for being coming down and sharing their information with us. And so the next item that we have is the public hearing and decision on Cardinal Creek area voluntary annexation. I believe that we have people here that would be that can speak to this, but do we have any public speakers signed up? All right, so with that, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Do we have a motion,
Motion to adopt the annexation.
to adopt the annexation? I'm sorry. Mr. Mitchell?
Mayor, on my schedule, look, we have 2 speakers on item number 7.
They're only available or willing to speak if there are questions, if council has questions.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so we now have a motion to adopt item B.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Okay, and so all in favor, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? Hearing no opposition, that passes unanimously. So the next item on our agenda is a public hearing on hearing to consider a request for reduction of the South Park Municipal Service District by an owner residing within the district. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers? We do have a speaker here. And I want to recognize and ask Adam Rue if he would like to come down and speak to this issue. Thank you very much, Mr. Rue, for being here this evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mayor Lyles, Manager Jones, council members, good evening. My name is Adam Rue. I'm the President and Executive Director of South Park Community Partners. We're a nonprofit organization missioned with the vibrancy of the South Park Municipal Service District, MSD6, which we serve through a contract and a partnership with the City of Charlotte. It's my privilege to be with you tonight representing our Board of Directors and on behalf of the more than 25,000 employees, 5,500 residents, and over 300 shops and restaurants who make the South Park District such an outstanding place. As you know, City Council established MSD6 earlier this year following a thoughtful, stakeholder-led process supported by city staff. The boundaries were carefully considered, and we believe they're appropriate as adopted. We're grateful for the partnership we enjoy with the City of Charlotte and with the South Park Association of Neighborhoods. And we're excited to leverage dedicated focus and funding to build upon South Park's rich history and ensure it is well positioned for an extraordinary future. We do this through a professional staff focused on advocacy, economic development, marketing and events, placemaking, and urban planning. It's our job to wake up every day thinking about how we make South Park an even better place to live, work, and visit. I'm excited about the work we've already started and will continue, and all of that work will create value for our commercial and our residential stakeholders. Our vision for South Park includes things like great streets with safer intersections and enhanced walkability, including the South Park Loop, a 3-mile urban trail that will be a defining asset for this community. Thriving retail and restaurants supported by a strong commercial and residential base, public space that is beautiful, safe, and well-programmed, and a compelling identity so South Park can stay relevant in an increasingly competitive landscape. We've already begun fruitful partnerships with public and private sector partners on these and many other initiatives, but it's early days. We are a brand new organization still in startup mode. Today's my 85th day on the job. We've got a lot of work to do to build this organization and build the community's vision for South Park and what we're going to accomplish together. It's a privilege, though, to be on that journey with the city, with our great partnership that we enjoy with the city, and with our community of commercial and residential stakeholders. I'm excited to come back to you at the end of the fiscal year and report on the progress that we've made on the objectives that we've all set together as a community as we work together to advance the vitality of this important economic anchor in the city of Charlotte. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Motion to close the public hearing.
I have a motion on the floor, then a second to close the public hearing. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please raise your hands. Are there any opposed? That's unanimous. So the next item on our agenda is the city manager's report. I'm going to ask Mr. Jones to handle the next step for this.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Tonight, we're doing something a little bit different, and we will have a 911 update. I know that over the course of the past month or so, we've provided some write-ups to City Council in terms of where we are. We thought that because there were a number of requests from council, it'd be better to have Deputy Chief Robinson come in and give you an update. I'd like to frame it a little bit as Deputy Chief Robinson comes up, is that we've been trying to provide core services in an exceptional way during the pandemic. We have struggled in some areas with hiring, and so while tonight we're talking about 911 telecommunicators, there have been situations in whether it's CATS or CMPD or even aviation. What we have been doing is tracking the progress that we've been making in terms of retention and recruitment, and we have been making some progress over the course of the last few months. I think it's important, again, and hopefully in the next few months I won't have to say this again, but as we transition from one council to another council, one of the things that was approved in this last budget was how do we address our hourly employees. If you go back during the FY23 budget process, we realized that we were having a higher vacancy rate with our hourly employees than we were with any other employee group across the spectrum. So there are some things that are part of this FY23 budget that we believe is going to be helpful. The Mayor Pro Tem will remember that maybe 2 years ago, you talked about shift differential, and that's something that's kicking in where there's a 2.5% difference between shifts. I think it's also important that what we did with hourly is we basically had 8% compensation increase for FY23, 4% in July, and another 4% right as we get to January 2nd. I think also what's important is we had retention bonuses that were the equivalent of 1%. I think one was in July, one was in September. So the concept would be over the course of the year, or maybe when you get up to January, at a minimum for the hourly employees, it's the equivalent of a 10% salary bump. Again, that doesn't take into account shift differential, as well as another 2.5% we provided for individuals who have a CDL and need the CDL to perform the service. So again, we believe that some of those actions have taken a situation that could be much worse and had us, let's say, tread water, if not make a little bit of progress. So I just didn't want you, Deputy Chief, to believe that you're the only person that has questions regarding, this area. And there's some things that CMPD have done over and above that we believe is going to help make a difference. So unless there's some questions for me, Mayor, I'd like to turn it over to Deputy Chief Robinson.
Deputy Chief Robinson, you have the podium and the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Jones, for the continued support, and to council for public safety in the city of Charlotte. It means the world to every one of our employees. We've been through a tough time as a nation, as a world, in coming out of COVID-19 and learning the new normal. But I can tell you, as we talk about our 911 issues, we're never satisfied. And we have been on top of this problem for a number of months, almost 24 indeed, as our numbers began to slip. And those metrics were part of our understanding that something was going on, and we have addressed it. But I would be remiss if I didn't thank and recognize Councilwoman Mayfield for the opportunity to engage with you, ma'am, at your town hall the other day, as well as Councilmember Johnson, and really enjoyed the opportunity to speak with, not only hear from you, but to speak with our community members. It's at those moments that you see what community is really all about. And what I'm here tonight to talk about is a continuation of that conversation that we've had, and to let you know that we share in the concerns of the mayor and council and the city manager, and we're taking immediate steps with your support and help to address that. So with that, we have experienced some staffing issues that have resulted in longer than we would like hold times. We have a standard called 90-10. What that means is that we want to answer 90% of our calls within 10 seconds of that person placing that call. To us, that's not even good enough. We don't want the phone to ring one time. We want to be able to pick it up and to deliver services to the person on the other end. Nobody, save for a few people who may call to ask what the weather is or upset about something, most people who call 911 are there to do two things: report a crime, generally speaking, a crime in progress, so there's an urgency there, or somebody who is in absolute crisis. And when we talk about the word crisis, we talk about the exposure to the things that people go through. But tonight, what we're going to talk about is our telecommunicator, our person behind that headset, behind that desk. We're going to talk about our goals, our demographics. I know there were some questions from council pertaining to our demographics, and then the measures that we've taken to retain and increase our staff. We need bodies to do this. This isn't a job that a robot can do. We need human beings, and we need people who are committed to this. I talked a little bit about our performance and the volume of calls that we have, and then our next steps. So next slide, please. So I would ask council and everyone gathered tonight to take a look at this lady here, one of our telecommunicators, wearing her headset. She's paying attention to 4 screens. This is her workspace. And so we'd all like a room with a window. This is her window into the world. And the calls that come in, and we receive on average about 1 million calls for service a year. That's about 2,700 calls per day answered by men and women who signed up to do this job. Think about the calls that come in, and as she's sitting there taking a call for service, one in particular comes to mind that we want to profile for you tonight, involving a gentleman who called just a few short months ago and spoke with our operator about a homicide that he had committed and that a body that he had hidden, and that body had not been found for 2 weeks. In fact, the victim of this homicide had been missing for 2 weeks and had come in from another county. There was a crime that occurred, and he had buried her body in a place that would have been very difficult for us to find. That call took over 20 minutes. I can't hang up on that person. I can't hang up on somebody who's giving information about a homicide. Our dispatcher stayed on the call for over 20 minutes, talking with somebody who she knew and had reason to believe. He admitted that he had committed a homicide and that he knew where the body was buried. He led officers to the body. He also was able to receive instructions from her about how to act when officers approached, talking about hands and talking about being calm, and I believe saved his life and brought closure to a family who was in desperate need of that. So as we talk about support, imagine you're that police telecommunicator and you just took that call. What kind of support would you need? Because when you hang up that phone, you're on to the next call, and it doesn't stop. The 8 hours, the 10 hours that you're there, let's say you picked up some overtime because your kid needs shoes for school, those calls never stop. And so when we talk about supporting the person who took that call, for example, and this, think about it, trying to make conversation with somebody who just confessed to a homicide, it's very difficult. And so we built a very robust network-wide, enterprise-wide peer support system. We have 3 of those heroes who are assigned to communications as telecommunicators who are able to help debrief and to go over and to talk with, hold the hand of, walk around the building to kind of decompress from a call like that. Because I can tell you, and I don't know if you can hear the emotion in my voice, but I can tell you it matters to me, and it matters to our chief, and it matters to everybody who does this work when you think about the human component of that and the magnitude of what these folks deal with. So we all know about EAP and counseling. We also know that we're intentional about providing our employees with downtime within their 8-hour shift. And that's a very appropriate and very reasonable thing to give them 2 breaks in addition to a meal break that's paid and that allows them to decompress and put the headset down. So next slide, please, for our goals. So when we talk about this, now just share with you the human side. Now we'll talk about the metrics and about the technical side. Our call flow, we want to optimize that at every time. Like I said, we want that phone to not even ring one time before we're answering it and we're delivering service. I understand when you get a call from a constituent saying that they waited on hold, honestly, 5 seconds or a couple of minutes or whatever it is, it bothers me. I take it personally, and it bothers everybody. Not that you're letting us know, please be clear on that. But it bothers us that somebody did not get the service that they deserved. What we talk about when we talk about the call flow is that we want to get the person, find the information, assign those resources, and get those resources en route. To do that, obviously, we have, when call volume peaks, and I'll give you an example, when we have a major incident. So think about the helicopter crash from a couple of weeks ago with the news station. We probably received several hundred calls inside of 5 minutes, answered by the same number of people. Now, that was just a normal day for us. Our highest call volume is between 1 p.m. and 6 p.m., Monday through Saturday. Sundays are pretty much a lower call volume day. I'm assuming because everybody's home and it's a day of rest, so we'll see. But the bottom line is that when you've got hundreds of calls coming in, by the time the person who's waiting on hold for 30 seconds gets, like they're saying, I need to get through to 911, we've already got resources on the way. So out of 1 million calls last year, 300,000 of them were duplicate calls. And so when we're saying, hey, we had to wait on hold, Not saying it happens every time, but at least 30% of those calls are duplicate calls. Is it acceptable? No, but it's context. So we want to minimize the impact of that resident. I think about it myself. If I call 911 and say, hey, I just witnessed an accident, or somebody just got assaulted, or I need a police officer ASAP, I don't have time to listen to voicemail, and I certainly don't want to listen to the phone ring and ring and ring. So we're taking some steps to address that. So how are we getting there? Next slide, please. We are intentional about hiring. And one thing we never want to do, and our chief has been extremely, in fact, crystal clear on this, is that we will not lower our standards in order just to fill a seat. We're going to be intentional about putting the right people in the right seat at the right time. But once we get people there, how do we retain them? How do we get them to understand that we care about all the things that they see? We talk a lot about the filter. Imagine if you bought a brand new car and you never changed the oil, never changed the filter. Pretty soon you'd get clogged up and you couldn't breathe. That's what we focus on with our folks, to say, listen, you've got friends, you've got people you can talk to, we've got resources within the CMPD. We've got a department psychologist that this council and the city manager very graciously approved for us. And it focuses on employee wellness. And when we talk about wellness, it's looking at the wraparound, the entire person, the person inside of that headset who's not just a statistic to us, not just a hire. And then when we emphasize optimal service delivery, then it focuses on understanding that the metrics of those calls are very important. Get the people what they need, handle that, and to move forward. So there was a question a couple of days ago about demographics, and we can't control, nor do we know the demographics of anyone who we hire, but we're very proud of the diversity that's shown throughout our ranks. And if you see on this next slide, I'll tell you what, when we talk about hiring, we have to talk about it in very fluid terms, because our relationship with the folks who recruit, hire, and train, this is a machine that works. And so we're able to tell you that, when we did this report, even on Friday afternoon, that 20 telecommunicators is now down to 16, because today we were able to hire 4 people that we had been talking to. So we're very proud of our people, very proud of the men and women who do this work. Next slide, please. So as we talk about this, I want to be clear. This is not specific to CMPD. What I'm about to tell you is not necessarily our fault, but it is our problem. It's our problem as a community. It's a nationwide trend that, with call centers around the country dealing with police, fire, and medic, that there are shortages of people willing to do that work. That's where the support of the city manager and this council have come in huge. And I will say that we've interviewed over 150 candidates this year. Now think about that for just a minute. That's not just 150 applications and we talked to everybody. That's 150 people that made the first cut, the second cut, the third cut. And it's not just about, hey, Dave Robinson, I want to be a dispatcher. I'm going to go do that. I've got to pass a variety of tests, and there's a North Carolina Sheriff Standards Commission. There are typing tests. There's a physical test. There are all kinds of tests that the state makes us do that exacerbates the process. So as much as I'd like to bring people in and welcome everybody with open arms, it just takes time. So proud to say that we have hired and retained 32 telecommunicators year to date, and that's a big deal for us. That actually is 36 today, so I'm very proud to say that. And part of the thing is to put ourselves out there a little bit more. As we talk, we've focused on police officers, and that's a great thing because the police officers are out there doing the work that they do. But when we talk about our telecommunicators, we've got to be intentional about trying to recruit them and to showcase that kind of work as well. And so hiring fairs have been a big piece of what we've done and have gotten our messaging out. Could go to the next slide, please. So this is where I come across to you with gratitude and just to say thank you, because with the city manager's help and with this council's help, we've been able to really change the game for this narrative and to articulate for not only our people but to the community where your priorities are and where the priorities for public safety are. So when we talk about the hiring bonus of 6 months in, that bonus went from $2,000 to $4,000. It's very important. We've also looked at creating more promotional opportunities, making senior telecommunicators, folks that, and I will say this, just on an aside, when we lose people to jobs within CMPD, we don't consider that a loss. We just consider that a move within the family. On Friday, we've got 2 former telecommunicators who are very proud to say that we are graduating them out of our police academy. So they're going to be, now think about the kind of police officers they will be, knowing the empathy that they've learned in the many years that they've done this work. The 1% retention bonus that was earlier talked about by the city manager, the 5% pay increase effective December 5th. The shift differential, ladies and gentlemen, has been a game changer for us and for our business across the board. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of the men and women and the chief, to say, hey, this has been huge for us, because it's not the same working 9 to 5 as it is 9A to 5P, 9P to 5A. There's a big difference just in the AM and the PM. And then the 4% salary increase that's going to take place in January. And if you speak a language that's on our secondary language incentive program, then there's another 2.5%, and we've been intentional about hiring folks in that way. Next slide, please. So when we talk about career path and the things that we've done, we are intentional about treating every person as an individual and understanding that not everybody processes information the same. Case in point, I go back to the helicopter crash. Our supervisors recognized that call taker and that dispatcher had a very stressful day. And so there was an intentionality behind going to have conversations with them, to pull them off the channel, to be able to have those resources. Peer support was deployed. And I believe in talking with that dispatcher that very day, there was just a peaceful calm about her after that took place. The roundtables, and I want to say this, I've attended those roundtables, and I have listened to the concerns of our telecommunicators and reported them back to the chief, who's had conversations with Mr. Jones and this council. And so their voices are being heard. And are we perfect? Absolutely not. I don't know of any entity who is, but I can tell you that we're so far down the road when it comes to our trajectory. The future's bright for us. Even in the midst of challenges, we feel very good about that. So when we talk about, I can't say enough about our mental health support. To the next slide. And we've talked about that. If you remember talking just about that filter and about how those calls come in just at such a rapid pace, and I already talked about the paid breaks during every shift and our peer support people. We do have a life coach, and I'm going to tell you what, the life coach is one of the most popular people, because that life coach is able to give our folks legitimate things that they can do to become healthier across the board, both mentally, physically, emotionally, financially as well. Marathon Health Behavioral Services, that's been a huge plus for our folks, and our folks use that. So let's talk about the numbers. If we could go to the next slide. When we talk about it, we receive almost 1 million calls annually. Now, our call volume has gone up 1.2%, and this council deals with numbers all the time and percentages. We say that only to say that it's going up. In COVID, we had a dive. We had more people are home. You're not getting as many calls, but we also experienced the staffing shortages from that. So our performance, for the next slide. And this is where the rubber meets the road for us. This is what keeps us up at night and honestly creates an anxious feeling in every one of our hearts who care about public safety. So when we talk about 60% of calls in 10 seconds or less, that's a good number. It's not great. It's not anywhere close to the 90-10 that we want. 90% of the calls in 1 minute or less. And again, I'm not talking about outliers. 97% of the calls in 2 minutes less than, 99% of the calls in less than 5 minutes. Now let's be clear, 99% of the calls in less than 5 minutes, no one's spiking the football about that. There's nothing noble about that. It's just the reality. And when we talk about 99% of the calls, that just means that there's only 1% of the calls that make it past 5 minutes. So when you have a constituent say, I waited on hold 20 minutes, and we investigate every single one of those calls, that's simply, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. Again, we investigate every single one. Typically, we find that people will call and hang up. call and hang up. Call, can't get somebody, hang up. That provides a cumulative effect to them, and it also creates, they go to the very bottom of the queue when a person calls back in. Again, our industry standard, 90% of the calls answered in 10 seconds or less. That's our goal, but it's not CMPD's goal. CMPD's goal is to have no delay whatsoever, and I believe we'll get there. Next slide, please. So when we talk about priority shift assignments, we looked at when our calls for service are coming in. Instead of it being a 1, 2, 3, first shift, second shift, third shift, we looked at fourth and fifth shift as being opportunities to cross over those shifts to where we bolstered folks at the right time. And that's helped us. It's helped us tremendously. Again, I talked about our trajectory being very positive. So we reclassified supervisors with the help of the city to being non-exempt, which allows them to earn overtime. And that's a big deal because they can go from being a supervisor to being a call taker just like that. Once their shift is over and they can earn overtime, we have authorized overtime again throughout the year to get us through these staffing issues. In fact, I rode the elevator up with a woman that works in our communications unit today, and I said, hey, what day is it for you? Because in our business, you never ask somebody, is it your Monday or your Friday, right? You say, what day is it for you? And she says, you know what? I don't even know. She goes, I banged out as much overtime as I can because Christmas is coming. And so, but I think about her because I don't want her to overwork herself just because she can. And I don't want her to think about us in a way that we're going to work somebody to the bone and then off they go. We care about the person behind that. But we got some good quality people there who are doing some terrific work. The other part is that we're looking at when you have an officer assigned to light duty, is taking that officer instead of working at a team office doing follow-ups, is that we want to put them on a console to where they're actually answering 911 calls. There's a difference between training somebody to be a telecommunicator, which is the pinnacle, the highest standard, and somebody being a call taker. So we've looked at a couple of things that have to do with those part-time folks. So when we talk about a teacher who's working in their classroom, you talk about somebody, 90% of the teachers I know work a part-time job somewhere. Why go to a retail store when you can come work with CMPD, do something? It's already somebody who's committed to service, committed to helping people. We've had good luck so far with that narrative, and we look for continued growth into 2023. So our next steps, obviously, we're not stopping, and we appreciate the support that we feel from each of you in this room. I can tell you that nobody cares more about this than our Chief of Police, Johnny Jennings. And when we talk about the safety of our city, and I believe he shared this quote with you before, and with his permission, I'd ask to say it, but Charlotte is not a preferred city if it's not a safe city. And that's the mentality and the mindset of your Chief of Police and all of the men and women who work here, sworn and civilian, who do this work every day. So I'm happy to entertain any questions that I can. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to engage with you tonight and to share this information. And that's our presentation. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Deputy Chief Robinson. I really appreciate it. I want to say thank you for your service, too. You've probably held so many jobs in this that you come to this with a level of expertise and empathy and understanding that I think is you clearly showed in this presentation. So thank you first. So are there questions for the Deputy Chief? We'll start with Ms. Watlington and followed by Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Two questions. How you doing?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure I understand some of the data. When you talked about the hang-ups,
Yes, ma'am.
how does that impact the numbers that we saw here? Are you all capturing those?
We do. And so when I take you back to the constituent call that says I waited on hold 20 minutes, we go back and we're able to run that number and see when and where that call was made and the number of times that call was made and hung up. And if they connected, obviously we don't want anyone to hang up. And obviously we want you to use 911 for emergencies and things like that to promote 311 and other opportunities that don't result in an immediate need for police or fire or medic. But yes, we do capture
how many
those.
hang-ups we see out of the?
I don't have that right off the top, but I can get that and provide it back to you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
The next question I have is, I saw the slide that had all of the salary pieces, and I'm wanting to understand, are those stacking on top of each other? And if so, what is the average increase in dollar amounts as a result of all of those salary percentage increases?
So let me put it to you this way. Most of our folks make well above what we would consider the entry level. Now, just a few short months ago, we were at about $42,000 for an entry level telecommunicator. With the support of this council, we're very proud to say that in January into February, and as we move forward, that entry level has moved with a 5 in front of it to where we're talking about $50,000 just to be right there in line with a police officer. And when we talk about to attract folks who want to come do this work, I think that's very important. You know, when I can go work and drive an Uber car and make near that, or I can work from home and not do shift work. This is an opportunity for us to talk about shift differential. And if you speak a foreign secondary language, or if you want to come do this kind of work. But when we talk about the money, we talk about it, those are, and I know it was kind of a jumbled up slide, but when we talk about the percentages, if you consider the 5% that just happened with the 4% that's going to happen in January plus the shift differential, that's an 11.5% swing. And for our folks, you talk about retaining people. And again, let me be very clear, money will not cure this. This is not a money grab. This is not a money play. This is a people play. I wish it was all just a computer, but that's not what anybody would expect when you're in crisis. You don't want to talk to that.
You said something that goes right into my next question. As far as it relates to remote work, given technology capability these days, what is the thought process behind remote work? And is that something that has been lifted up as a potential incentive?
That's a wonderful question, Councilmember, and I will say that I hope and believe we will get there at some point with technology. I think that just like you remember in the 70s we had the big mainframes, and now we've got it in an iPhone. And I think that we're going to be able to have people plug in and to log in with the right equipment in years to come. We're just not there yet. It's a great idea, and certainly one that we. Because a lot of call centers now don't exist. They're all just folks at home who are able to plug in and do what they do.
What do we need in terms of technology to make that a reality?
And again, I'm not a technology person, but I will say that what outweighs the technology at this point is the human side of that, because we don't, as much as we talked about the peer support and the talking with each other and the EAP, we don't want somebody to be buried in their house and then, without there being, we got to flesh that out a little bit. I don't believe we're there yet.
So we do have the technology today. It's just a matter of figuring out the rest of our system?
No, ma'am. I don't know of any technology that allows us to do that. What I'm saying is that I believe in the coming years we're going to see that be an option, and I think people are going to, the market always builds to the capacity where we are at that time. I think people are going to recognize the importance of public safety and how if we can position people at home to do that, it wouldn't be a stretch in my opinion.
Okay, I'd be interested to understand from a technical standpoint what's available.
We'll follow up with that.
Awesome, thank you. And then finally, you mentioned, well, not finally, second to finally, you mentioned part-time call takers and how,
Yes.
Question for you, and I'm sure you've thought about this. You mentioned teachers, I believe, and you mentioned light-duty officers. How about our EMTs and nurses? Is it open to anybody, or are there particular professions?
Councilwoman, I will take anybody who can pass the test, who has a genuine servant's heart and a desire to serve and to lead in this way. And when we talk about, there may be people out here listening to this very discussion tonight who say, you know what, I don't know that I want to be a police officer, but I sure would want to give it a shot to be a telecommunicator and to serve in that way. And when we're talking about part-time work, we're talking about literally coming in. You could work, 4, 5, 6 hours a day and have an opportunity to contribute to something very positive in society.
Thank you for that. And then finally, as it relates to your roundtable discussions, and even if you all are conducting exit interviews, are there any items right now that you need help from us to address?
No, ma'am, and I'll tell you why. Because the support that we've received from this body and from the manager has been immeasurable in terms of what our opportunities have been. And I'll give you just a small example. Even something that seems as small as changing our supervisors from salary to hourly was a game changer for them, because instead of working them 70 hours a week for the same pay, they're able to contribute to the mission, I think, in that way. So it's similar to what happened with patrol sergeants. And so what we're seeing is not only with salary, but the parallels that have come up between our sworn and our civilian side. And that merger is a sight to behold.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Chief, for your presentation. So I just have two things from you. First, from a telecom perspective and what is forthcoming, it might be interesting to see what certain companies like Verizon do, where you have dedicated landlines for people who provide service, customer service. So it's a never out perspective, and I'm sure that Ms. Askew and others could probably lean into that in addition to security. But I would encourage you to think about now, while that is coming down the pipeline, how you would roll out all of the peer wraparound services once that hits, right? So when it does hit, then we would be prepared to actually take that on. I also wanted to just say, looking at your numbers, you had 150 candidates this year that sort of got through the process, the end of the process, and you hired 36 year to date. That's a 24% yield of hiring, which is pretty high for any role, right? But with that space of you're coming up short 30, effectively it's going to take you another 9-10 months to hire at that same yield. So my question would be, how can we expedite, right, the yield? Like, how can we build your funnel out? Because you didn't share how many candidates you actually had to interface with to get to 150.
So let me say this, and if anyone is listening and thinking about this, you can go to cityofcharlotte.org and apply. And what I will say is that we have plenty of reasons. And let me just back up. It is a moving wheel as we talk about the hiring process. And so in years past, we've waited until we got a certain number of applicants, and then we would process those applicants. And we just can't afford, quite frankly, to wait on that anymore. And so it is a revolving, not a revolving door by any means, but a revolving opportunity. So when we get several candidates, we move them through the process. Now, here's the catch, though, is that there are so many steps along the way. And let's not forget, we're competing against the places that do allow work from home and that do allow people to do whatever, people do when it comes to weighing out their options. And so we're committed to getting the best of the best people and not lowering our standards by any means to get that right person who's there for the right reasons. And I think, our retention strategy, particularly when it comes to just the personal side of how we do business and welcoming somebody into the CMPD and the City of Charlotte family is critical to that effort.
I like all the work you've been doing as it relates to retention and hiring. I would just like to see us think about other ways that we can increase your candidate funnel so we can reduce the time to fill these 30 vacancies that we have.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mr. Bakari, do you have any comments or questions?
Well, I would just remind everyone that when somebody called 911, Shody fire burning on the dance floor. That's my joke. Yeah, that wasn't for real. The one thing I would say, though, is if we're looking for throughput, I think on the digital divide stuff that the city CIO is doing, connected to the hire program that economic development is doing, that's where we get scale, right? So ultimately, we know we need to hire a lot of jobs in CMPD right now. We understand that's challenging beyond any other department that is trying to hire and having those challenges right now. So I really think it's probably a mix of a communications and PR campaign paired with the throughput that is going to be coming through programs like Hire. So I think that's where we're going to get the connection, where thousands of people kind of see it, get up training opportunity to make their way into a funnel where they can be hired into those programs.
Well, and that's a very nice point, sir. And I will say this, when I talked about the 2 police recruits who are about to graduate the academy, that for us is a success because we talked about the family, we talked about CMPD and the city as a greater family, and I think that's there are opportunities within CMPD from a career development standpoint we've got plenty of people in management who started out as dispatchers, and so, and Councilmember Anderson, back to you just a second, is that when we talk about what we can do, it's like at Councilmember Mayfield's meeting, I mean, to engage with people who say, how can I help? How can I be part of something bigger, something that will help provide a career or something to that nature? It's that not everybody thinks about this as a career choice, and I think it takes, again, a special kind of mindset. But imagine the power if each one of you in this room just told one person at your next community event about CMPD and about being a telecommunicator. I think it helps us change the narrative on policing and certainly what community service looks like.
Mr. Driggs, any comment or questions?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So, Chief, appreciate you and the people in the call center. I'm sure it's very stressful for them in that line of work to be so overwhelmed that there are calls they can't answer. I mean, it's a critical situation. I know they're very caring, and so whatever we can do to address this. I wanted to look at these numbers. It's 1 million calls a year. You can bet the ones we hear about are the ones lower down. And we don't hear about 60% that get answered in 10 seconds or whatever. But I will note that, for example, 97% of calls in 2 minutes means that there are 30,000 calls a year that aren't being answered within 2 minutes. And that's a concern. Do we have a means of somehow separating those life and death personal injury situations from the property crime calls? I'm thinking, I looked at your triage thing, for example, and you talked about we could divert to police fire, but could people call and have a machine just say, do you have a personal injury or safety situation, or do you have a property situation? And maybe triage that way.
Yes, sir.
Because, you know, what happens is you have an accident or something, and there's a huge amount of time sensitivity. And from what you're describing, I'm not sure your operators can tell. You know, the calls are coming in, and they have to pick up before they find out. So is there some way that we can improve the triage? You mentioned it on your slide.
Yes, sir. And I will say that when we talk about the metrics behind, we've gone so far as to just throw, you know, ideas on the table to see what other agencies are doing, agencies that are in way worse shape than we are. And I say that not to say we're better or worse. I just say that it's in this industry, it's tough sledding right now. But the press 1, 2, 3, it sounds like a brilliant concept, and I was like, that's great, let's try that. But the problem is that therefore eliminates our 90-10 as a standard. And our goal is to have a human being answer that call in the end and say, hey, what do you need? The problem, too, is that we have people who often use 911 and ask about the weather. We had a guy, no kidding, I'm sorry, it's probably against decorum, but he called and called police 911, police fire medic. He goes, I'm having an argument with my girlfriend. Is it illegal to kill a praying mantis? Is it a protected species? I'm not kidding. And our dispatcher was a little, he said, what are you talking about? The point is that we get calls all the time that don't ever need to come to anybody, let alone 911. I wish there was a way for us to say, if it's truly an emergency, call this number. The problem is that we've ingrained 911 such into the fabric of our society. Now, it does give us an opportunity to talk about 311, certainly during the day. Expanding 311, would be something that we would love to talk through, because then those property crimes and those non-emergency calls that we could easily route to our people ready to take the report would not tie that number up, would not tie that line up for 911.
So, and one more question. I think we appreciate, based on everything you've told us, the difficulty of getting the people and addressing this. But nonetheless, if we wanted to offer some outlook Do you have any kind of an objective, like a target in mind and a timeline where we could say, okay, this is our plan and this is what we hope to accomplish?
I'm glad you asked that, Mr. Driggs, and I'll tell you why, because I'd like to come back in 90 days and report back to this council and this body and exactly where we are, because you know, I don't want you to listen to anything that I say as much as watch what we're trying to do. And I don't mean that what the police department's trying to do, but what we're trying to do together. And I think that's the big thing, is that our folks feel supported. And if they say that and feel that, then they're going to tell somebody else. And so my hope is that in 90 days, I come back and I say, Mr. Driggs, we're happy to say that we're only 10 people down now. And then in another 90 days, and hey, we've retained X percent of people, and we're helping our people get through this. And hey, we've got a couple more in the police academy. Those are things that that get us excited. And so we're not going to stop. And I don't think that's. I think you can hear it in my voice. This is such a critical need and piece for us. Look, the very fabric of community trust begins with, if I call you, will you answer the phone? It's that simple. And if I call you and you answer the phone, will you show up? Because for somebody in crisis, in whatever situation it is, public safety requires that. And so our intention is to keep the intensity through the roof until we solve this problem. And I believe we'll get back there. I do.
So I look forward to hearing any ideas you have, and please, I think, on behalf of all of us, communicate to your people our appreciation for their work.
I certainly will, sir. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Graham?
No comments other than to thank you for your work. Anything I say I would probably be redundant at this point, but thank you for your work, and I'll see you in 90 days.
Thank you, Councilman Graham. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Some of my questions have already been addressed, Chief Robinson. But on slide number 14, you went over multiple measures or steps that CMPD has taken. How long has it been since some of them have been implemented? If there is any metrics that we can have as to how we are doing, whether this is working or if it's not working, or if we need to do something more, because you made it very clear that pay is not an issue, and that's not going to fix the problem. It's the human component of it. And I think Mr. Driggs touched on it. It's a very stressful job. It's a difficult job. You have to be mentally prepared to take on this responsibility. So I'm just trying to figure out if we can set a timeline, goals, and milestones that, let's say, we have an industry standard of 90% of the calls within 10 seconds or less has to be answered. So from 3 months from now, here is our goal, or 6 months from now, or 9 months, right? How are we going to get there? Because Mr. Driggs is absolutely right. 100,000 of our calls, based on this data, based on the numbers that you provided, are being answered after 5 minutes. And that is concerning, because that could be a call about someone's life in danger. That could be someone suffering from heart attack. And, you know, I understand there is an industry-wide staffing shortage, but I'm trying to figure out if there is any way we can figure out if any of the steps are not working, or we need to go in a different direction.
Well, that's a very thoughtful question, Councilwoman Asmira. And I will say that when we talk about our goals 2 years ago, previous to COVID, and you'll never hear me blame COVID for any of this, other than to say it's been a challenge, as we all, as human beings, have experienced the challenges of that. But 2 years ago, we were meeting and exceeding that 90-10 rule routinely. I'm not going to say we got cocky about it, but I can tell you that it wasn't a problem. And in our business, we go to where the problem is. And once we saw those numbers begin to crest and to come down, we recognized the need to address that. Now, what I will say is that I'd love to sit here and have a crystal ball and be able to say we'll be back to where we need to be. We'll be full staffed, and we'll have a healthy, happy environment within the comm center. But I can say that there is no stone that we're not willing to turn over and have turned over. Again, I'll just put it out there. In 90 days, I'll come back. If this council asks me to come back, and we'll talk again, or if we do it in a memo, or we do it in a way that keeps you up to date on what our metrics are and kind of where we are, because I can tell you, I spent some time with the chief today, and this is the one area that when he talks about his employees, you can feel the difference in the tone of his voice, and second only to when he talks about the community and what the expectation is for the CMPD and for service delivery. And you look at his customer service program, you look at the way that is all about making sure the customer is happy and satisfied and getting the services that they need. And so when we're missing that mark in any way in those 30,000 calls, not to minimize any of that, one call is too many. So I don't know that we're ever going to be satisfied. I don't know that we're ever going to be to a point where we're saying, oh, we're back to where we were pre-COVID and we're in a good place. I just don't think we will. But I'd like to come back.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to see Mr. Jones, if he can get some sort of a periodic update on this to see whether any of this is working, or if it's not working, if there is anything else that we need to explore. So just monitoring the data would be very helpful. Other thing I'd like to also find out, so we are talking about the response time now, but has there been, how are we doing on, by the time the call has been made and answered, to officers showing up? Obviously, we also have a shortage of police officers, right? Has that been an issue? And I know that's not something planned for today, but I would also like to understand that if that's an issue that we need to also look into.
So imagine, if you will, this would not be a linear process. So, for example, with the call that was made by the gentleman who reported that he had committed a crime, as he's talking, the dispatcher is able to multitask and is entering that call for service. As she is talking to him, officers are en route because they're seeing what that is. That call taken by that call taker is put into the CAD system, the computer. It goes directly to a terminal where the dispatcher is, and they say, here's what we've got, and they're reading that call off. And so officers are en route. I will say, back to the duplicate calls that come across. And again, I think that's a big piece of it. It doesn't tell the whole story. But again, if 10 people call to say that a house is on fire and 8 of those folks had to wait on hold for any amount of time, it's going to seem like we didn't care about the house being on fire. But I will say that the 2 people that got through already had fire trucks and CMPD and medic rolling to that scene. But again, one concern about our operational ability is one too many, in my opinion, and the chief of police shares that. I share his vision on that, quite frankly. But when we talk about the delivery of that service, we investigate, like I said, every single one that comes across that sounds bad or is bad or whatever, and we hold ourselves accountable for that. And generally speaking, like I said, there's always context that seems to be important, but we run down the facts and try to return those back to council.
Thank you so much, Chief Robinson. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am. Nice to see you.
I'm sorry, I was going to say Ms. Ajmira again. Ms. Molina.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have many comments other than to say thank you for your service to our community. I think that the work that our men and women who serve us in public service, whether it be someone who's dispatching an emergency or a crisis, or the men and women who serve us for public service, I think is a tremendous effort, and I really appreciate it. I'd also just add, while I'm speaking, I love to hear that we're speaking in a qualitative and a quantitative manner. I think they're inextricable. I think that the quality of service shouldn't suffer because we're chasing a quantitative metric. And so in order to make sure that those two are cohesive, as we intend to, rise to the occasion or rise to the metric that is quantitative, we also have to hold as a standard the quality and service that we deliver to the, the constituents. So
I'm delighted to hear that there will be an update in 90 days. I don't anticipate that we're going to hit that mark in 90 days, but like any project, it's kind of, we're establishing a baseline. That's a milestone, a milestone to check in, a milestone to, continue to monitor and control what expectations that we have and continue to strive towards excellence. So thank you again for your service, and that's all I have.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Mitchell?
Thank
We
you,
do
Madam.
notice that you have on a NASA shirt today, a jacket today. I want you to.
I told him that jacket was bad. Nice jacket.
Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say thank you for the staff who work at 911. They play a very important role for our service to our citizens, and I look forward to your report in 90 days. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Deputy Chief Robinson. If you all don't know, he's one of my favorite public servants in the city.
Thank you, ma'am.
He's got a heart of gold, a heart to serve, and I thank you for your work, and thank the work of the 911 operators. CMPD is doing the best that they can with the tools that they have. These outputs, the responsibility is on us. So this is a management, and this is, you're doing the best that you can, but if I look at slide 13, and, I mean, we have to take into consideration if the industry standard is 90% of the calls answered at 10 seconds or less, and we're at 60% of calls, that's a crisis. When residents are on hold for 2 minutes or 10 minutes or however long, for 1 minute. We also know that we're short-staffed in CMPD officers. We're losing, over 100 officers, I think, this year. And I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but, in retirement, and we're short-staffed. So you said something about not lowering the standard for hiring. I would say that changing standards may not be lowering standards. And I've asked Chief Jennings this before, and maybe we can talk about this with the city manager. We need to look at where we're losing candidates. We need to look at the process and find out where we're losing candidates. And Ms. Anderson said, the 24% that we're hiring versus interviewing is not a bad statistic, but we could certainly improve that, especially if they've made it through all of the steps. So we had a meeting with the assistant city manager about this statistic, and we talked about different options. One of the things I'd like to see in 90 days is perhaps an employee survey from the 911 employees. Let's hear from them. I think those are great resources, the peer support and the downtime and the EAP and all of that. But let's hear from them. Maybe there's something else that we can offer. And I don't know what that is. I mean, do they need childcare? Just throwing that out there. I don't know. But that's one of the things that we talked to the assistant city manager. So I'd like to see a survey from the employees, Mr. Jones, in 90 days. And again, this is a management issue. We know, they're doing a great job. They can be doing the best job. But our residents, they expect more from us than 60% of our 911 calls answered within standard time. So, and you said something great. Charlotte is not a preferred city if it's not a safe city.
That's Chief
So
Jennings.
with the shortage of police officers and the shortage of 911 operators, I think we need to look at our hiring standards and our recruitment and where are we losing candidates in the CMPD hiring process and also in 911. And I've had a report pulled before, maybe an updated report, Mr. Jones, from CMPD as far as the process, which step are we losing officers, minority officers, and it was a really detailed report. And we can take a look and maybe changing some of the processes or standards. Another thing with 911, can you talk about the change in the statute or testing process that's going to increase the hiring process from 4 weeks to 10 weeks?
Yes, ma'am. And thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for your kind words. And I will say, just to clarify, the industry standard is the gold standard. It's like saying, we want to, and I don't even know a parallel correlation, but we want, the 90-10 is it's what we hold as the industry standard. It doesn't mean that Charlotte's at 60 and everyone else is at 90. It just means that that's our standard. And 2 years ago, we were meeting that routinely. And so I do think that across the board, and I will say, we have looked regionally, to your point about the testing. And when I say we're not going to lower our standards, what I didn't say was, and what has happened, I think very correctly, so if you sign up to become a telecommunicator with CMPD, the first thing you do is you fill out your application. The clock starts for us there. Then if you pass the initial screening or requisite application, then you go and sit for what's called a critical test. Critical is what, it's an industry kind of a test. Well, for years, we only took a certain, like, you had to score like an 80, I think it was an 85%. And again, forgive me for not knowing. But we looked at that and said, why is that? Why is that? And a couple of people took the test, and even people who were actually doing the job now didn't score very well on the critical test because, listen, I'm one of those people. I don't test well. I don't test well. But you give me a problem, I can solve it, but I don't test well. And so my mom can tell you that, even to this day. But as we look at what makes people fall out of the process, we did not want to have critical be part of that reason. And so we looked at other cities. We looked at Atlanta. We looked at Fayetteville. We looked at Columbia. We looked at Washington, D.C. And we realized that our scores, like what we held as our top level score and the minimum to get in, was way above what the industry standard was, certainly regionally. And so lowering that has improved that process. Now, I will say that in the job process of trying to get people hired, it did not help us all at all, the Sheriff Standards Commission. Those new requisite requirements that came out for our dispatchers, and then we're talking about, now you think about it, you've been a dispatcher for 20 plus years, Sheriff Standards Commission comes out and says you're not grandfathered into anything, you have to go for a drug screen, a psychological test, a physical test, right? And you've been doing this job 20 years. So that threw a lot of people into a retirement mode to say, I don't want to do that. And quite frankly, it just lengthens the process. Now, that's for the telecommunicator. When we talk about a call taker, that is where our sweet spot is, I believe, because telecommunicators, we hire you, we train you, we get you where you need to be, and it's a process. The call taker, that process is not as long. And so designating it as a call taker versus a telecommunicator is going to help us with that process.
So the 4 weeks to 10 weeks, you think that's going to affect, if you will, the being able to recruit more people, or it's going to decrease it, right?
Sure. If I could hire somebody in 4 days, I would do that. And here's the thing, if my mortgage is due and it's going to take 10 weeks to get hired and I don't have a job, then I'm going to take the first job I can get. And as much as I want to work for CMPD, I'm not going to wait around to do that if I've got babies to feed. I'm just not.
Yeah.
And so I think part of our call is to say, hey, this is something that, and look, we're willing to even early hire people and to give them a job, to get them through the door as we work through that process, because, we've got opportunities within CMPD that could bring somebody in quicker. But again, we still have drug screen and background checks and things like that, but we're trying to make it, we do everything we can to hire as many people as we can from anywhere, anytime. If you want to serve this community, we want to talk to you, and that's just how it is. I think that my overarching comment was just to say that when it comes to our standards and what the expectation is within Charlotte, being the largest agency with, between Atlanta and DC. I think that's something that we've had a luxury for a long time of being able to be very selective in who we wanted. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And one of the things that I saw on Facebook, I think, was a video educating the public, 911 versus 311. So I don't know if our communications department, if we can increase that and maybe put it on the government television station or really educate the public, if that would help to reduce their calls, if that would help.
We'd be happy to
Thank you.
assist with that in any way.
Ms. Mayfield? Thank you, Ms.
Congratulations,
Thank you,
Deputy
ma'am.
Chief Robinson. I'm glad that I was able to attend the graduation, and thank you for attending my community town hall and working through the breakout sessions to explain some of this. I do look forward to the update from you. Councilmember Johnston invited me to participate on the call, and it was surprising to learn that the state created some new requirements and regarding testing and those requirements. As you just mentioned, we didn't grandfather those who have been with us for a very long time. So that was a lot of institutional knowledge that we lost and that we're losing very quickly without a transition. So I think what I hear from my colleagues is there's an opportunity that for what you all need, there's support. And I was glad to hear you say that it's not a money problem. We're not just trying to attempt to throw money at it. I do want to make sure that we do continue to focus on the most qualified and the best candidates. I do not want us to just choose an individual to have a body in the seat, because this is a very stressful position, and we want to make sure that we're not only protecting our community, but we're also protecting the mindset and the well-being of the individuals. So thank you for what you have done and what you continue to do.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Congratulations, Deputy Chief.
Thank you,
Amazing
Mayor
to see
Pro
your
Tem.
insignia change over the years.
Thank you, sir.
So as you said, this isn't just a Charlotte issue, it's a national issue. And I have about 3 questions, and I'll ask them all, and maybe if you can answer them now or follow up,
Yes, sir.
that'd be great either way. We often think about how technology can help, but I wonder if we have a technology problem on the opposite side. Have we quantified the effect either locally or nationally about the effect of the pocket dial? That 911 call that happens, how do you discern the difference between, a phone, a 911 call in somebody's pocket or in a pocketbook versus somebody who's hiding and in a really bad situation? How long does that take, and what kind of bandwidth does that take up on a 911 system?
So let me just say I did that the other day. I called 911 by accident, and I realized what I'd done, and I hung up immediately, but it didn't connect. But the simple fact is that it happens more frequently because certain ways that phones are pressed, buttons and whatnot. I think when we talk about the bandwidth for what that looks like, I think that when we get a call, and there are cues that they're trained on to listen for breathing or for taps, or there are things that if you're in a situation that you're being held against your will, or any number of things, but just that if you can hear me, just tap the phone or whatever. You can tell the difference to a degree about that engagement, to where if it's just a pocket dial. Now, what we do offer and what we do from a triage perspective is, as these calls come in, we will call the number back if it disconnects, and also are able to triangulate the last known position. So, for example, if we got one that we believed was in some form or fashion a crisis situation, but we couldn't get that information, we're already looking at where that call is being made, so we're sending officers to that location.
I just wonder, if we're talking about a situation where every second counts, and just looking at even the existence of 911 is an example of where the public need combined with technology in the private sector to provide a tool. I'm wondering if this might not be an opportunity, maybe, again, not just on a Charlotte level, but on a national level, to improve technology, to help with a problem, with an issue. Maybe there's something that the technology, a way the technology can work better to help contribute to a better solution for people getting help. Again, in the same kind of context of how this service, 911 service was created in the first place.
Yes, sir.
Maybe we should just look a little deeper in that over the next few weeks or months.
Yes, sir.
And something that came up here, again, we can get back to this, just the conversations and some of the slides. I wonder what the equity in response times is to folks that are calling 911 that are using our language access services. Just wondering maybe if there's an opportunity to dive a little deeper into those numbers to learn more about how effective or better effective we could be as we grow those services, and as is a priority of the City Council.
Yes, sir. And I will say I just had the privilege of serving as the department's ADA liaison for about a little over 2 years, and I can say it was a very when you think about the disadvantages that people would have to call 911 who are, let's say they're hearing impaired, or, so our TDD service, for example, has to do with our ability to have somebody on staff who can answer those calls. If it's a language line, either we got people in the room to answer those calls and to get that information, or we immediately transfer to an outside third-party vendor. So if somebody calls and they're speaking, I don't know, pick a language, but if we don't have somebody in the room, then we transfer that out. So yes, and it's a very good question, because I've often wondered that too, and being a street cop for 25 years, I tell you what else, and I want to invite each of you to do this, and I know you're all very busy people and got things to do, and I believe you might have done this, is to come and sit and to see what they go through, not as, and I want to be clear, not as an apologist mindset, but in a way to say, oh gosh, it's tough, but to say, hey, this is real, this is the real world. I mean, imagine how powerful that'd be in talking with your constituents, to say, I sat with our dispatchers and I listened on the headset. And I'm gonna tell you, the hair stands. I'll go in any dark alley in any place in Charlotte. Doesn't faze me. But you listen to some of these calls and the sheer terror that's in somebody's voice, and it'll make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. So those are opportunities. We'd love to have you, and again, to show what that work looks like, and to help us continue to develop solutions that are sustainable.
So thank you very much, Chief Robinson. We'll see you in 90 days and look forward to hearing the next steps.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
All right. That was, I think, the longest city manager's report that we've had in a while, but we've still got a few more items, and we will have a closed session tonight. So the next item on our agenda is item 10. Is there a motion to adopt a
For
resolution?
approval, action A and B, Mayor.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. Anyone in opposition? Thank you. The next item is item 11. Is there a motion to adopt a resolution certifying and declaring the results of the November 8th Spencer Barn referendum?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Quickly.
Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to thank again the voters for approving this particular agenda items on their affirmative vote on the election day. It deals with transportation, housing, and neighborhood. And as we approach our infrastructure meeting later this month, certainly the dollars for transportation and neighborhood goes to improve some of the infrastructure in our community. So I think that needed to be noted. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is item 12. Is there a motion to authorize the manager to apply for a grant of up to over...
We didn't vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, we haven't voted. Thank you. All right, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? None opposed. Thank you. The next item is item 12, to authorize the manager to apply for a grant of an amount up to $2.1 million for the North Carolina Department on Public Safety for Craighead Trian Flood Mitigation Initiative, authorizing the manager as designee to accept that grant in that same amount, and adopt a budget ordinance appropriating that
Motion
amount
to adopt action
for
A, B, and
the
C.
Capital Stormwater Capital Projects Fund. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the items, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? So with that, before we go to appointments, I think that James Mitchell has a note that he would like to address concerning why he is wearing a NASA jacket today.
So-
And then we'll go into the appointments, and then we'll go into the closed session, Mr.
Now, Madam Mayor, thank you for this personal privilege. 16 years ago, the third African-American female went into space, and she spent 13 days at the space station. And I'm happy to say she resides in Charlotte, and more important, she's my lovely wife. So happy anniversary, Joan Higginbotham.
We're proud that you made her a resident of Charlotte. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you. All right, the next item, tonight the city council will make appointments to boards and commissions. You voted by ballot and submitted them to the clerk. And nominees with 6 votes or more will be automatically appointed, and then if necessary, we'll take further action. The item is for appointments to the Arts and Culture Advisory Board. Madam Clerk.
Yes, ma'am. Melanie Gross has been appointed to that position.
All right, congratulations, Melody, and we look forward to your work on the advisory board. And now I'm going to recognize the city attorney for a motion for closed session.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'd like to motion to go into closed session pursuant to GS 143-318-11A3 to consult with the city attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege in the matter of Daedalus LLC versus City of Charlotte.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the closed session, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? All right, we will go into closed session, and we will adjourn from that closed session. So thank you for all of you that have watched this meeting, and really appreciate that you attend and listen, and thank you. Any feedback next time, and have a happy holiday. Good night.